Chapter 235. Willing Chinese sister, why are you doing this? Zhu Qin shouted at her sister, her face full of dissatisfaction. Normally, she wouldn't believe that she would have such an attitude toward her most respected sister. At this time, the two had already returned to the villa. Enberg's hands and feet were broken on the spot and taken away by the people of the Astral Gate. What Zhu Qin couldn't understand was that her sister, who was omnipotent in her heart, would actually personally lead the way to find Brother Xian because of that person's threat. That person is very strong. Zhu Qin's face was expressionless as she said calmly, "If I don't help him find Embark, then he can do what he says." Zhu Qin was stunned. She seemed to be trying to recall which sentence Gu Nan had said. Soon, she thought of it. That Zhu Qin actually gave up just like that. It's really boring. Shadow Song muttered discontentedly, as if she didn't see a good show. Her main purpose in coming here was to observe Gu Nan. In the end, because the opponent was too weak or too sensible, there was no effect at all. Embark didn't make any more trouble. No matter how many tricks he had, they were all at the level of the third stage. Star Water was his last trump card. Even this trick was easily countered by Gu Nan. What else could he do to turn things around? Now this traitor had already been sent to the Astral Gate by Gu Nan. After being verified and executed, Gu Nan's mission would be considered complete. This level of mission was really not difficult for Gu Nan. He was too lazy to look for clues bit by bit, so he directly went to the opponent's biggest backer. It was good that his backer was obedient. Otherwise, he would just start a massacre. When Gu Nan returned to the Purple Civ Heaven, where the Astral Gate was located, the mission reward was in his account. Welcome back, 5-star member, Shadow Song's neighbor Uncle Wong. The soft female voice of the star soul sounded again, reading out this code name without any hindrance. Gu Nan didn't look at Shadow Song's fiery eyes and received the mission reward. As a public organization, the Astral Gate naturally wouldn't do things like contribution points. They only gave 2 rewards. One was physical objects or currency, while the other was points related to a member's level. For example, Gu Nan got 120 units of spirit stones and 5-star points. Every time he accumulated 100 star points, he could upgrade his member's level. It was a very simple and clear rule, and it was precisely because of this that it was suitable for those who did 1 vote and left. This was the logic of an open organization. Immediately afterward, Gu Nan divided 100 units of source crystals in his hand and replaced them all with active origin source. This was the purpose of his trip. How will the evil divine palace react to this highly active world source energy? Gu Nan asked as he lightly stretched out his hand and touched the source energy before him. This was not the first time that Gu Nan had come into contact with the world origin. In fact, it was not even the evil divine temple. Back in the White Mist organization, he obtained the world will's mission through the translation method, and the final feedback to the translator was the world origin. It was just that the evil divine temple's feedback was a private copy. Until now, there were still a lot of incomplete private copies lying in Gu Nan's copy space. Similarly, the world origin of the immortal and demon world was very normal. Once Gu Nan gained control of it, the world would also be under his control. If not for this, Gu Nan wouldn't have been able to adjust the coordinates of the immortal and demon world. It was just that he wasn't strong enough. Otherwise, he could hide the immortal and demon world in the blink of an eye. Now that he was exchanging spirit stones for a common commodity in the heavenly planes, what was the so-called highly active source energy? The evil divine temple quickly gave him an answer. It vibrated slightly, and a message that Gu Nan completely didn't expect was transmitted. Discovered a fragmented, ownerless divine fire. Do you want to contaminate it? Gu Nan stared blankly at this notification. It was as if thousands of divine beasts were stampeding through his heart. Thousands of words could only be summed up in one sentence. So the world origin is the divine fire. Why didn't you say so earlier? At this moment, Gu Nan finally realized the greatest use of the evil divine temple. It was to translate everything in this world into game terms that he could understand. Divinity, God's kingdom, divine fire. These are all things that could only be found in the game. The Pantheon world might have them too, but Gunan had yet to come into contact with them. The relationship between these three things was very simple. Divinity was the core of the gods, and they used it to mobilize their divine power. The gods' kingdom was the foundation for the gods to become gods, and also the source of divine power. And the divine fire was the proof that the gods controlled the gods' kingdom. There were divine fires everywhere in the gods' kingdom, and the divine fire was the law that belonged to the gods. Only then could the gods control the changes in the gods' kingdom. The so-called igniting the divine fire did not refer to igniting it in the divinity, but in the gods' kingdom. And once the gods fell, the divine fire in the gods' kingdom would be extinguished, and the gods' kingdom would naturally become ownerless. Gunan was very familiar with these three things. Now that the evil divine temple was telling him that Gaohua's world origin was the fragmented, ownerless fire, Gunan immediately understood. The divine fire represented the law that belonged to the gods. Wasn't that the world origin controlled by the astral lord? And in a world that was not controlled by the astral lord, the world origin was, of course, the ownerless fire. No wonder the translation method only allowed him to obtain a private copy. That was because the world will itself did not give out the world origin at all. It was just a display. Only by directly plundering it by a cultivator could the world origin be truly extracted, regardless of whether it originally had an owner or not. In the eyes of Shadow Song, Gunan's expression was changing rapidly. Sometimes he was surprised, and sometimes he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, as if he had encountered something that he could not do anything about. Of course, she didn't know that just this one word had given Gunan a deeper understanding of this world. This world really does correspond to the game. Even the loopholes in the game settings have been fixed. Gunan couldn't help but sigh. In the game, the world origin didn't count as a god's kingdom, so there was naturally no divine fire. However, in this real world, the instance dungeons were also planes that existed in reality. That was why Gunan didn't realize it in the first place. In his mind, there was no such thing as a god's kingdom. But now, everything was clear. Contaminate the divine fire, Gunan ordered as his consciousness sank into the evil divine temple. The evil god was the opposite of the gods. The gods represented the most normal operation of the world, while the evil god wanted to contaminate it. Whether it was the divine fire or the divine spark, it was all the same. 100 spirit crystals in exchange for the world origin wasn't much. Not long after, another notification came from the evil divine temple. Divine fire contamination completed. Obtained 20 sin points, 200 points. Inside the evil divine temple, Gunan couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. At this moment, he seemed to have truly understood that sentence. That sentence that would always appear in the game CG. Blasphemy is sin. If you want to read a novel, go to the Apex Novel Network. Chapter 236. Wulin Chinese Network. Crossing the sky to become an evil god was the latest chapter. Blasphemy was a sin. In some ways, this was Gunan's mission. Since he had obtained the identity of the evil god, he naturally had to stand on the opposite side of the gods. When his consciousness returned from Evil God Hall, Gunan looked around. Shadow Song was still calmly looking at him. The astral gate's golden light was still flashing. Everything seemed to be the same, but Gunan knew that it was still different. Evil God Hall was proving to Gunan that his path was the same as the people of this world. That meant, were the NPCs ready to steal from the players? Do you mean you want to settle in purple civ sky? Shadow Song looked at Gunan with a strange look. At this time, the two of them were sitting in a small shop. Gunan drank a cup of tea leisurely, while Shadow Song sat opposite him with a strange expression on his face. During their conversation just now, Gunan had clearly revealed that he intended to settle down in the Ziluo heavens. Purple Civ Sky is a big place. Many break world people want to settle there, right? Gunan asked, noticing the strangeness in her words. A big plane meant more resources. If a break world person wanted to improve, there would be more opportunities in a big plane. Normally, Shadow Song said, but this is a special time. Astral World is going to war. Astral World was going to war. Gunan knew about that. Long before he came to the Purple Civ Heaven, He had noticed some clues from the actions of the Star Ocean Pavilion. Now that Shadow Song mentioned it, Gunan understood what she meant. There was going to be a war. That was an opportunity for Breakworld people and Star Masters. No matter if it was Astral World or someone trying to invade Astral World, they needed to recruit people. Did they not need to pay to recruit people? I understand. Gunan nodded. If he had the chance, he didn't mind going back to Astral World. Star Realm, Shanghai Pavilion. The headquarters of Shanghai Pavilion was located on the most prosperous planet in the central galaxy, the Heavenly Planet. For the cultivators of the Outer Domain, Heavenly Kingdom Planet lived up to its name of Heavenly Kingdom. It was indeed a paradise for cultivation. But on this day, Heaven discovered something that was not quite like Heaven. In a small room in Shanghai Pavilion, one of the three pavilion masters, Yu-Gio, was facing a man and a woman. Yu-Gio had a smile on his calm face, but the faces of the man and woman opposite him were ashen. A great enemy is coming. Old you still have the mood to attack us at this time? The man looked at Yu-Gio quietly, his eyes filled with disappointment. Yu-Gio stared back at him unwaveringly and said indifferently, "It is precisely because the enemy is coming that Shanghai Pavilion only needs one pavilion master, and you guys are not suitable." Perhaps Yu-Gio's attitude made the woman angry. Even though she was trapped, she still said, "Yu-Gio, who is behind Shanghai Pavilion? You know it better than we do." Yu-Gio laughed. "You guys are trapped, but that person has not responded. Do you guys not understand?" The man and woman looked at each other. Their hearts sank. They knew that Astral World was that person's Astral World. How could she not know what was happening to Shanghai Pavilion? If she knew, things would be even scarier. "Stop talking crap. Hurry up and deal with them." A voice sounded from behind Yu-Gio. It was the young girl, No Return, who was bringing Yi-Chun with her. It had only been a year, but Yi-Chun had already reached the break world level. The secret techniques of Shanghai Pavilion were extraordinary. The young girl, No Return, had once caused a scene in Shanghai Pavilion. For this reincarnated Buddha, the man and the woman recognized her. Seeing No Return appear, the two of them felt relieved. Although the young girl, No Return, was a top-class breakworld person, if they teamed up, they would not be able to kill the two of them. It was like Yu-Gio knew what they were thinking. He smiled and said, "We still have to wait for the other two." "Oh, they are here." He pointed to the other side. Two more people walked out of the shadows. This time, it was a man and a woman, but the man looked much older. He clearly had the face of a middle-aged man, and his body was a little fat. When he walked in front of everyone, he smiled and said, "Mr. Zhua's subordinate, Shang Rong. Nice to meet you guys." Yu-Gio recognized the name Shang Rong, so he said, "Shang Rong, one of the 5 monuments. She works for that, mister." He turned around and looked at the woman who appeared with Shang Rong. He could not tell how strong she was. Could this person also be one of the 5 monuments? No. The woman looked calm and smiled. She denied it. "My name is Gunyan." Gunan, who was far away in purple sky, did not know what was happening in Star World. Even if he knew, he would not care. Gunan was very happy. He was focused on leveling up. He did not have time to care. Shadow Song had already left. She also had her own things to do, so it was impossible for her to endlessly observe Gunan. Not to mention, staying here would only make her suffer. Gunan was trying to understand the active source. He was trying to understand the relationship between it and his sin points. The so-called active source was, in fact, an artificially created product. In many Sky Star Path, which was an inner world, the world's original source was much easier to find and obtain than the surface world. The powerful Star Masters were there to steal the original source. For some low-level original sources, they would seal them and use them as resources to trade with others. That was how the origin crystals came about. The world breakers needed the active source. Big organizations unsealed the original source and gave it to them. Because of that, the active source had to be used immediately. Otherwise, it would be useless. On the other hand, the world breakers and Star Masters did not have an unlimited amount of original sources. The original source was a rule. The rules that were suitable for one's body could be used better. If it was not suitable, it could only be used to understand other things. But before the active source was unsealed, no one knew what was inside. They could only rely on their luck. According to Gunnan's calculations, normal break world people who wanted to create rules needed 10,000 units of origin crystals. Of course, that did not include the parts that failed to create and the parts that were used for research. In fact, for most people, research was the most expensive part. In comparison, Gunnan realized where he had the advantage. With the existence of Evil God Hall, he did not need to do research. It did not reject the original source. No matter what kind it was, it could accept it. That was what set him apart from other world breakers. He could quickly improve his ability to go against nature. If you wanted to read a novel, go to Apex Novel Network. Chapter 237. Gunnan was extremely familiar with the rules of the game world, and the Evil God's Temple was like a translator that could translate everything in this world into game terms for Gunnan. Ever since he learned that the origin of the world was the divine fire, Gunnan had truly embarked on a bright path. He had never reaped sin points so easily since he came to this world for so long. Gunnan, who was temporarily staying in the purple Civ heaven, felt like he had returned to his time in the game. Every day, he would immerse himself in a large number of quests, finding the ones that suited him and had rich rewards. For a quest master like Gunnan, this was perhaps the most suitable life for him. In just 3 months, Gunnan's sin points had reached 1,700, and he had accumulated close to 4,000 points. His sin points had now exceeded the 1,500 mark, but Gunnan was not in a hurry to construct the third maxim. In the past, he probably would not have waited so long and would have tried to go further. But now that he had a stable source of points and sin points, Gunnan also had some other ideas. He wanted to throw in 4,000 points at once and obtain a heaven-defying third maxim. Divine Fire Contamination completed, obtained 40 sin points, 400 points. Another absorption of the active origin was completed, and Gunnan's sin points and points entered his account again. This time, he finally had enough points. Gunnan immediately sank into the Evil God's Temple and began constructing the third maxim. Beginning construction of third exclusive maxim. Extracting prerequisite maxim. Please choose from the known abilities. Choose the following abilities. Spell Breaking Staff, Gigantification, Death. Confirm. No abilities found. Choose to purchase. Purchase confirmed. Please determine the ratio of abilities to be used. Exclusive maxim construction in progress. In the Evil God's Temple, as Gunnan issued one order after another, he threw in one ability after another, and the construction of the maxim was progressing slowly. The reason why the third maxim that Gunnan wanted to construct required so many points was because of 2 key points. First of all, this was a law that required 3 abilities. Secondly, Gunnan didn't have any of the 3 abilities he needed before, so he had to buy them all again. Buying 3 new abilities like this and not being able to use them normally was undoubtedly a huge loss. But Gunnan did it. Why? Rich. Based on his current progress, by the time Gunnan collected 2,500 sin points, he would have enough points to advance to the 5th order. Therefore, he could put a lot of points into the 3rd order. After all, at his level, his previous equipment and skills were becoming less and less useful. For example, the effect of Dawn's Praise could be suppressed by Yu-Gi-Oh's Curse Law. His flash attack ability would also gradually be discovered by others. After reaching rank 5, even the damage reduction effect of passivation would be suppressed. This was a suppression caused by levels, and it wasn't something that could be reversed by humans. Therefore, acquiring new and powerful abilities was something that Gunnan had to do. The 3rd exclusive law, Sky God, has been constructed. With a specific proportion, the 3rd order was completed without any accidents. The 3rd order was called Sky God. This was a law that was born for combat. Unlike the previous 2 laws, it had a short introduction. Sky God, you will naturally possess divinity and can temporarily transform into a sky god. The game's introduction always liked to be deliberately mystifying. In a more gamey language, this law had 2 abilities, one active and one passive. The passive was possessing divinity, and the active was transforming into a sky god. Divinity was a unique characteristic of gods. it was still quite useful in some special circumstances. It could also have unexpected effects when making certain judgments. Therefore, the sky god law had a good passive effect. Needless to say, the active effect was the biggest reason why Gu Nan chose this law. Transforming into a sky god was not just transforming into a god, but a real sky god. Super high resistance, HP, and destructive power. An invincible existence that could crush the laws with its body. It was precisely because of this overly powerful effect that the sky god law's active effect was often jokingly called sky god descending by players. The words descending were enough to describe this law. It should not have appeared in the mortal world. His consciousness returned to his body. Gu Nan slowly stood up. Even Gu Nan could not help but reveal a smile on his face when he successfully constructed the third law. He walked out of the room. This was the place he had bought in Purple Sky. Only world breakers could live in this area. The decorations were very luxurious. There were even professional servants, maids, and butlers. Master, seeing Gu Nan appear, a maid quickly came forward and said, Mr. Luo, when sent someone to deliver 2 boxes of pastries. They are Blue Devil World specialties. Got it, Gu Nan answered casually. Luo was his neighbor. He was not cold at all. He was a strange world breaker who was very friendly to ordinary people. To Gu Nan, who was at the same level as him, he was even more friendly. Sometimes, he would come over to say hello and give Gu Nan gifts. He would even invite Gu Nan to go on missions with him. If Gu Nan did not know Luo had a few concubines, Gu Nan would have thought he was gay. Ignoring Luo's gifts, Gu Nan quickly went to the mission hall of the Astral World's door. He started another day of missions. This time, however, he found one that he was rather interested in the series of missions. To be more accurate, it was a mission that allowed him to earn spirit crystals and settle a personal grudge at the same time. Deep Sea King. Deep Sea King? Not bad. I saw him become a world breaker with my own eyes. Deep Sea King was the one who chased him. If there's a mission like that in front of him, he will not mind doing it. We found out that he has been going to some small planes. I think he has joined some organization to take on missions to earn spirit crystals. If we can lure him here, the 4 of us can attack him together. We have to kill him as soon as possible. In the Star World, inside the Shanghai Pavilion, a group of people were sitting together. They were seriously discussing a small matter. Who were the people sitting there? Shanghai Pavilion only had one leader, Yujio. There was the reincarnation of Buddha, the girl, No Return. There was one of the 5 monuments, a top world breaker, Shangron. There was also Gu Nan, who is said to be was confident. These 4 top elites were discussing Deep Sea King, a world breaker who had been rated by Shanghai Pavilion as a planet breaker. The question had come from Yujio. Who is this Gu Nan? Why do we need to pay so much attention to him? Yujio still remembered Gu Nan, but he did not pay much attention to him. To him, Gu Nan was just the previous ruler of the 6th system. He had slipped away from Yujio's hands. He had some skill, but that was all. Now, the 3 of them had taken a big detour. They wanted to use Deep Sea King as a point to lure him over without leaving a trace. In Yujio's eyes, this caution was unnecessary. The 4 of them surrounded him. It was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. 2 of them were enough to kill him. But he was not stupid. The girl, No Return, and Shangron were clearly not on the same side, but they were still very careful with Gu Nan. That was enough to explain the problem. Was there something strange about him? Yujio's heart was full of questions like that. He said, no matter what, if the 3 of you want to kill this person, Shanghai Pavilion will cooperate. If you want to read a novel, go to Apex Novel website. Chapter 238. Wulin Chinese Network. Travel through the sky to be an evil god. Latest chapter. In Shanghai Pavilion, the 4 of them discussed their plans and went their separate ways. Shangron and Gu Nan left together. They were in an endless galaxy when Gu Nan suddenly said, I am going to the 9th system. If there is a situation here, let me know. Shangron was unfamiliar with the term 9th system, but he reacted quickly. Okay. Shangron and the other 4 were called the 5-degree monument. They were quite famous in all the worlds. The 5-degree monument was a very famous ancient legacy. Every generation, 5 people could get it. They walked the path that was most suitable for them, and every generation was different. The things that were passed down were different from the previous generation. That was the strangest thing about the 5-degree monument. Shangrong's status among Zhua's subordinates was not low. Otherwise, he would not have been the vanguard to invade Star World. In front of the woman in front of him, he did not put on airs. In fact, Shangrong had followed Zhua for many years, but he had never seen the boss pay so much attention to someone. This woman named Gunyan, what was so special about her? Shangrong and Zhua's subordinates were the same. They could not help but be curious. Zhua's half-man, half-woman special form made them dismiss the possibility of her being beautiful. There were not many answers left. The 9th system? Shangrong looked at Gunyan's disappearing shadow and spoke to himself. He was not worried that Gunyan would not be able to catch up. For Break World people, this distance was like turning around. What he really cared about was that when Gunyan came to Star World, she said she wanted to go to the 9th system. Perhaps he could find out where she was from there. In the 9th system, Gunyan was walking down the familiar streets of the Red Carp. She felt as if it was a lifetime ago. In less than 2 years, she had reached the Break World level. Although she always believed this day would come, she did not expect it to come so quickly. She did not expect this day to come so soon. Speaking of which, perhaps I should thank that fellow. Gunyan's lips curled into a smile, but there was not much joy in his eyes. She thought of that person again, the person she had accidentally met in one of her reincarnations, and then personally brought to the astral realm. It was that fellow who walked so fast that no one could catch up with him. He had turned this world into such a mess that even the person behind her was paying attention to him. In the blink of an eye, Gunyan had already walked to the door of care for one's family. It was still the same familiar door and wall, but Gunyan felt a little unfamiliar. After all, she was a Break World being. Her life level was different from a normal person's. Plus, she had been missing for 2 years. Who knew who was in charge of care for one's family? However, this was not important. Anyway, from today onwards, care for one's family would have a new leader. Who are you? A voice sounded next to Gunyan. It was a gray-clothed man who was standing in front of care for one's family. He looked at her with caution. Even in the poorest 9th system, Shanghai Pavilion had sent 2 Break World people. This was one of them. The Break World person did not find Gunyan. He was just a guest at care for one's family. When he came out, he bumped into Gunyan. He noticed there was something wrong with the woman. Next to the gray-clothed Break World person, Gunyan's father, Gu Mingyuan, was walking him out. The moment he saw Gunyan, it was like he had seen a ghost. However, Gunyanji did not look at her father. Her gaze moved slowly to the man in gray, and a strange smile appeared on her face. Life and death. Death and life. It was like those words had some special power. They came out of the gray-clothed man's heart. It was like he was in a black and white space. On his left was death. On his right was death. He was standing on the border between the two. The gray-clothed man was shocked. He wanted to use his own rules, but he suddenly saw life and death reverse. The cycle of reincarnation changed. Life and death space was pressed against each other. His consciousness was gone. In Gu Mingyuan's eyes, Gunyan only looked at the gray-clothed man. The Break World person started to fall to the ground until he was dead. Star World, Central System, Planet Heaven. Deep Sea King was one of the leaders of the Blood-Dependent Alliance. His power was not the best, but his position was top class. His God Hall was on Planet Heaven. Gunyan was on Planet Heaven. After all, with Break World people's skills, traveling through space did not take much time. However, when Gunyan found the mission kill Deep Sea King at the Star World Gate, he did not immediately accept it. He did some research. He had returned to the world of immortals and demons. While Yin Xiao was in control of the God Nation, she had also paid attention to the situation in the astral realm under Gunyan's request. The news he got from Yin Xiao was that there was a big change in Shanghai Pavilion. Yu Jiu became the only pavilion master. The signs of war were getting clearer. Typically, there were a lot of Break World people being assassinated these days. There was no need to even mention the superhumans in important positions. Under such circumstances, there The quest of killing the king of the deep sea did not seem to be unusual. If they could use money to kill all the Breakworld people in Star World, the invading forces would be happy to do so. Maybe some people are waiting for me, Gunan said in a language that only he understood. It was not that he did not consider the possibility that this mission happened to appear in front of him. With his current power, even if he faced a real Star Master, as long as it was not the kind of existence that controlled a world, he would not be afraid. His sin value had broken through 1,500 points. It was not only the third rule that strengthened him. His evil god body had also been strengthened to a considerable extent. Speaking of the Deep Sea King, Gunan was interested in having a chat with him. The reason he came into contact with Deep Sea King was because of the chain of events. Deep Sea King's representative, Qin Xuanji, also had her eyes on the god's personality. According to what they said, that thing should be called a world stone, but its nature would not change. Later, for the sake of this world stone, Deep Sea King even personally chased after him. In the end, he ran into Gunan, who had leveled up to level 4. He was hit by the displacement rule, which was 10 times more critical. Since then, Deep Sea King had never appeared in front of Gunan again. Gunan could not find the time to retaliate, so it had been delayed until now. Now was the time. Gunan also wanted to know where this bloodkin had gotten this information. Lan Si and her brother had also come for Godstone. Could Deep Sea King have something to do with the world of gods? These questions needed to be confirmed by Deep Sea King himself. Now, Gunan stood in front of the door of the Deep Sea Temple, calmly looking at the solemn palace. Someone noticed Gunan's presence and asked cautiously, "Who are you?" "I'm here to kill people," Gunan replied. "If you want to read some light novels, go to Apex novel website." Chapter 239, Wuling Chinese Network. Transmigrating through the sky to become an evil god. Latest chapter. Deep Sea King had been very annoyed lately. After fighting with Gunan, he hid in another place. Before confirming that Gunan was dead or that he would not appear for a long time, he decided not to come back. For Breakworld people, it was not strange for them to not return for a few decades. He knew what was going on in the galaxy world, but his position was not something an ordinary world breaker could compare to. He had a lot of resources. Why would he need to make money from a war? For someone like him, he wanted to avoid the chaos of war. He wanted to bury his head like an ostrich. After everything was settled, he would come out and be the Duke of Peace and Happiness. But he did not know why these days, no matter if it was the Blood Carrier Alliance or his Deep Sea God Palace, there were many problems. It was not a big problem, but it had accumulated a lot. He had to come back and deal with it himself. He could not rely on a clone to control it. Even if he was a Breakworld person, he could not escape the feeling that he was lucky. That Gunan had not come to cause trouble for him for a long time, and he was being chased by Shanghai Pavilion. He did not have time to care about this. The God Palace and the Alliance's matters were trivial. That person did not have the ability to control things to this extent. Plus, when Deep Sea King started to find excuses for himself, he had already made a decision. So, he came back, and at the same time, he stepped onto the road to death. Flower J Planet Chamber of Commerce will deal with it this way. If anyone else has an opinion, then let them have no opinion. Deep Sea King sat in his high position and calmly gave orders. He did not notice anything strange. But the next moment, there was a strange movement at the God Palace's door. It made his face change. The World Breaker had a lot of experience. He almost instinctively wanted to rip open space, but the enemy was faster than he could have imagined. An ordinary fist pierced through the air. The strange light on the fist broke through all the defenses of the King of the Deep Sea and landed heavily on his chest. What about Deep Sea King? In the face of such an attack, the expert who had once chased Gunan like a dog did not even have the chance to react. His chest quickly caved in. The King of the Deep Sea looked good. He was wearing a navy uniform and even armor. However, in front of Gunan's fists, the outcome would be the same with or without the armor. Boom! The King of the Deep Sea was blasted to the ground. His chest caved in as if he had been hit by a meteorite. Do you know about Godhead? Gunan stood in front of the King of the Deep Sea and asked calmly, as if he was asking, "Have you eaten today?" The King of the Deep Sea was at a loss. but he reacted quickly. This might be his only chance of survival. I know, boom. Another punch landed on his head, directly exploding his entire head. Then, Gunan shook his head lightly and said, "You're too slow." If he answered slowly, it meant that he had thought about it. If he had thought about it, then he must have made it up. That was Gunan's answer to NPCs. It was the same judgment he always had. When Gunan killed the king of the deep sea, a round of applause came from the side. It was the only leader of Shanghai Pavilion, Yujio. It's really shocking. I didn't expect you to improve so quickly even at this realm. Yujio looked at Gunan with some surprise in his eyes. He was one of the first people to notice Gunan. He knew how much he had improved. Before, he thought he had paid too much attention to Gunan. That was from a perspective of the entire galaxy war. After all, to people of that level, no matter how strong a world breaker was, it was nothing. The person behind Shangrong and the others wanted them to kill Gunan. That was strange. After seeing Gunan improve, Yujio had to admit that it made sense to kill him as soon as possible. If he was allowed to continue developing, it would not be long before killing him was beyond his ability. "What's the matter?" Gunan asked casually as he looked at Yujio strangely. He was not afraid of Yujio anymore. He was not in a hurry to take revenge. Even an idiot would know that the one in front of him could not be his real body. No curse master would be stupid enough to show his real body to others. Yujio sighed regretfully. It is a pity that too many people have noticed your talent. As soon as he finished speaking, Yujio's figure had already drifted away with the wind. What was approaching him was an inexplicable power of law. Gunan knew that this was the effect of the curse power. But this time, it was not a damage increase. It was a weakness. After all, Yujio was one of the leaders of Shanghai Pavilion. He was the top world breaker in the world. His rule power was not easy to bear. Weakness landed on Gunan. Gunan felt that his life force was rapidly draining away. He seemed to have aged a few decades. He could not muster up any strength. Fortunately, his sin value had a breakthrough. His body of evil god was strengthened. Otherwise, the situation would be more serious. Gunan looked at everything coldly. Deity Descends was already in his hand, but he was not in a hurry to use it. Yujio used weakness to weaken himself. This meant that he definitely had helpers. Although the opening was good, he still had to find his opponent. Shangrong had seen the strength of Gunan's body. She was not stupid enough to die. Instead, she hid far away. She raised her hand and waved a light blade. She quickly approached Gunan. If one looked carefully, they would find that the light blade looked simple. However, it was very unique. The energy inside it was not stable. Instead, it was circulating all over. Every part of it was much stronger than before. This was Shangrong's rule, the rule of commerce. "Are you not going to make a move?" Shangrong looked at her side. Gunan had naturally rushed over. However, she did not seem to be in a hurry to make a move. "We just need to hold him back," Gunan said softly. "Don't forget, our goal is the immortal demon world." Shangrong's eyes flickered. "Although that is the case, we cannot let him go if we can kill him. It might not be that simple." As if to verify Gunyan's words, thousands of Buddhas rose from the surroundings. They knocked on the wooden fish in front of them. Countless chanting surrounded Gunyan and the others. It was not strange that the young girl, No Return, wanted to make a move. However, Shangrong could not help but frown. He felt that something was wrong. In the next moment, he suddenly understood. Not good. Her goal is bastard. Yujio's flustered and exasperated voice could be heard. His sorry figure appeared in midair. Countless Buddhist chants condensed and surrounded him. At the same time, the weakness he cast on Gunan disappeared without a trace. Gunan's expression did not change at all. He allowed the light blades to slash his body. A large wound appeared on his waist. However, he did not seem to feel anything. His gaze swept past Shangrong and Gunyan. In the end, it landed on the young girl, No Return, who was gradually revealing herself and standing opposite Yujio. "Is this what you mean by attacking Shanghai Pavilion?" Gunan recalled what the young girl, No Return, said when he returned from the hero world. Yes, the young girl, No Return, still had a calm and indifferent expression. However, There was a hint of doubt in her eyes. You seem to know which side I am on? In No Return's eyes, the fact that Gunan stood there so calmly meant that he was certain that she would attack Yu-Gi-Oh. Naturally, he had also calculated her side. However, Gunan only smiled. He flipped his hand and opened the Heavenly God rule. I don't really care about that. If you want to read some light novels, go to Chapter 240. Gunan indeed didn't expect No Return to act. He didn't even know she was here, so how could he have guessed? But for Gunan, there was no need to doubt No Return's alignment. She had met Shadow Song before, so this alone was enough to prove that she and Zhuozhuo opposed each other. Even Xinghai Pavilion has been instigated by Zhuo. Gunan looked at Shang Rong and Gunyan and immediately understood what had happened. Gunyan had died in the immortal demon world, but now he had come back to life. Besides Zhuozhuo, who else could do this? Gunan's cold gaze swept over the two, and his body began to emit a faint golden light, which gradually became denser. On the immortal demon world side, Yin Xiaoxiao had already sent a warning. So Zhuozhuo's goal was still the immortal demon world? Be careful. Gunyan's attention had never left Gunan. Seeing this, he immediately said, I'll deal with him. Shang Rong calmly nodded. Of course, he wouldn't look down on Gunan, but he also wouldn't be overly afraid of him. After all, he was also Zhuozhuo's subordinate. Wait, what is this? Before Shang Rong could finish his thought, he saw a scene that made him dumbfounded. He saw the golden light that was slowly emitting from Gunan's body suddenly brighten and then retract. Gunan's entire body expanded, and his entire body glowed with a golden light. Right now, Gunan was more than 5 meters tall. Originally, he only had a somewhat sturdy body, but now he had become a muscular man. His shirt had completely burst open, revealing his sturdy chest. But this wasn't the reason why Shang Rong was shocked. What he was shocked about was the terrifying might that the other party could create with just a wave of his hand. Gunan was slowly walking forward. He walked on the void, and with every step he took, the space would suddenly shatter, bursting with a dazzling golden light. The entire Xinghai Pavilion was filled with this endless golden light. The thousands of Buddhas that were originally floating in the surroundings were completely suppressed, and more than half of them had already dissipated in the wind. The aura coming from Gunan was too majestic. He was like a scorching sun. Just the power that he emitted was enough to destroy the Buddhas. The young girl, No Return, stared blankly at this scene and could only curl her lips speechlessly. The Buddhist kingdom in a palm that she had painstakingly set up had failed before it could be put to use. Yu-Gi-Oh, who was forced to reveal his true body by Wu Gue, sank into deep despair. The reason was simple. Gunan's first target was him. Gunan's footsteps seemed slow, but he was actually fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Yu-Gi-Oh. His golden arm directly smashed down on Yu-Gi-Oh's head. Why? Why me? Yu-Gi-Oh couldn't figure it out. Shang Rong and Shang Rong were clearly here to kill him. He was just helping them. Why was he their first target? Was it because he had offended him? The space around Yu-Gi-Oh was completely broken. He could not break space to escape. He was in a desperate situation, so he finally showed the courage of the Xinghai Pavilion leader. If he could not escape, then he would fight to the death. Even if he had to fight to the death pang, Yu-Gi-Oh was so angry in his heart. Countless curse rules were thrown at Gunan's body. He thought he could at least block his opponent's rules, but none of them worked. Gunan's palm came down and smashed Yu-Gi-Oh's head. Gunan, who had become a sky god, could kill world destroyers like he was killing chickens. Yu-Gi-Oh was the Xinghai Pavilion leader, the top world destroyer, but he ended up the same as Deep Sea King. As for the curse power that Yu-Gi-Oh used before he died, they all landed on Gunan's body. Weak, old, confused, tired. All the curses that landed on an ordinary world destroyer were enough to make them lose 90% of their fighting power. But Gunan took them all. The rules landed on Sky God's body, but they did not even create a splash. They disappeared without a trace. God was just a creature with a higher life level than ordinary people. Sky God was a real god. He was not affected by the rules of the mortal world. From a certain perspective, this was the true law-breaking. If you wanted to stop Sky God Descends, you had to use physical attacks, or create an environment that was not suitable for Sky God to fight. However, neither of these two were easy to achieve. After killing Yu-Gi-Oh with a single palm strike, Gunan looked at Gunyinji and Yu-Gi-Oh again. Yin Xiaoxiao's call was getting stronger. He knew something had happened in the fairy demon world, but he also knew he had to get rid of the people there first. His Sky God Descend state could not be maintained for long. If he did not use the big skill to kill the enemy, would he have to wait for the big skill to wear off and the enemy to kill him? So Gunan did not waste any time. He turned into a gold line and went straight for Shangrong. Shangrong looked at the gold shadow that was flying fast. The space along the way was broken into pieces. He felt his scalp go numb. His head was about to explode. If Zwa was not so powerful in his heart, he would have cursed. You wanted to stop an opponent like that from breaking through space. I'll thank the heavens if I can run away with my life. But Shangrong was not Yu-Gi-Oh. Shangrong had been forced to reveal his real body by young lady Wu Gue. Even if Shangrong came with his real body, there was still room for him to turn back. Shangrong didn't care about the demeanor of one of the 5 attainment monuments. She casually shot out a light blade before turning and running without hesitation. But how could his speed compare to Sky God Descends? A heaviness that felt like the sky was collapsing appeared behind Shangrong. Shangrong turned back in despair. He saw that Gunan had already arrived. The glory that could cause considerable damage previously could not even scratch his opponent's skin. Facing this scene, Shangrong's hopeless heart suddenly had a hint of understanding. Then, 2 words popped out, Sky God. His opponent's ability was as unparalleled as a Sky God. Any person or thing that tried to block the Sky God would be crushed into pieces without hesitation. Just as Shangrong expected, Gunan's fist suddenly landed. His target was Shangrong's head. However, the moment his fist touched Shangrong, a voice that seemed to carry some kind of magic rang out again. Life and death, death and life. The black and white space of the seal of life and death did not land on Gunan. Instead, Shangrong experienced it. He felt his vision turn black and then bright. He did not die in Gunan's hands. That punch seemed to have disappeared, or perhaps he had already died once and was resurrected. When he heard Gunyin's strange voice, Shangrong believed that it was the latter. Before he could wake up from the joy of escaping death, he realized that Gunan had disappeared again. This time, Shangrong did not need to think to know what had happened. Not good. This is a diversion. He turned to look at Gunyin, but it was too late. On the other side, Gunyin felt the power coming from above his head. He could not help but reveal a trace of helplessness. You even know about resurrection? Chapter 241. Gunan's battle strategy had always been clear. Then, by concealing his true goal, he would make the enemy make the wrong judgment, and finally he would die step by step. Knowing that something had happened to the immortal demon world, Gunan did not rush to save them. This was to reduce the enemy's strength as much as possible. Of course, Yu-Gi-Oh had to be the first to kill, because his curse master profession was far more troublesome to Gunan than other opponents of the same rank. Therefore, when Gunan completed his transformation, he attacked immediately. Even Gunyin did not have time to save him. As for the remaining 2 opponents, it was much easier to kill first. There was no need to consider when facing an opponent with a 4th rank mapping law. If he killed Shangrong first, Gunyin would not hesitate to resurrect her. The relativity between life and death. At the 3rd rank, only Gunyin could resurrect himself, but now it could fall on others. An experienced player like Gunan, of course, knew that mapping meant everything is relative. Life and death, creation and destruction, time and space, force and reaction. The first thing that Gunyin found might be life and death. But mapping was not really invincible. Although it could be used on Shangrong, it also had its own weakness, which was delay. The higher the level of the mapping power, the more time it needed to prepare. In other words, this was a law that could not withstand assassination. It was also because of this that Gunan used the diversion strategy to trick Gunyin into using the seal of life and death, and then suddenly change the target. I'm more familiar with mapping than you are. As the voice rang out, The golden fist came crashing down. However, Gunyinji made an unbelievable move just a moment ago. She suddenly hit her own temple with her palm, and the originally beating brain was instantly pierced. She committed suicide. Shang Rong looked at this scene in shock, not understanding the meaning of Gunyan's move. Was she going to commit suicide in order to not die in the hands of the opponent? Gu Nan retracted his hand and muttered, "Seeking life and death? Smart NPCs are troublesome." Even with Gunan's experience, he had to admit that Gunyan's suicide was the best choice. As long as she did not have to bear Gunan's extremely lofty heavenly god law, she would at least have a chance to resurrect herself, even if she had to pay a huge price. If he was killed by an Empyrean god, then even projection would be powerless. Without Gunyan and Shang Rong not seizing the opportunity to escape, there was only one outcome left. As Gunan, who was in his heavenly god state, punched out, this peak expert that was renowned throughout the myriad heavens and was known as one of the 5 Degrees Monument instantly turned into dust. In the next instant, Gunan tore open the void and descended into the immortal demon world. In the fairy demon world, 2 world breakers arrived. One of them was Shang Rong's good friend, the exceptional tablet Qin Fengye of the 5 attainment tablets. She was a beautiful woman that gave off a sinister feeling. The other one was not even a human. It was a strange creature with a snake's head, a human torso, and a lizard's lower body. Forz was who was in the outer world. It was not strange for her to have subordinates like that. The snake-headed man was called Bailey. He was enjoying the smell of the fairy demon world. A living person, the smell of a living person. Bailey usually lived in a place where no one lived. He was only released when he was on a mission. Now, he was very fierce. If you get the origin, you can eat any living person you want, Qin Fengye coldly said. It made Bailey Tuo come back to his senses. You said it. Bailey Tuo stuck out his tongue that was like a tongue and licked his lips. Qin Fengye ignored him. She immediately flew forward. She knew the origin of this world was in front of her. She did not need to look for it. The fairy demon world was Zhua's place. If it was not for the fact that he could not leave, he would not have needed to arrange it. Thinking about Zhua's situation, Qin Fengye's eyes turned cold. After all, tens of thousands of years ago, this was the woman who had taken the galaxy world from Mr. She was not simple. If it was not for that person's unexpected performance, they would not have needed the fairy demon world's origin. Qin Fengye stepped into a manor with a single step. The thoughts in his mind were all gone, and his figure went straight in a certain direction. Standing here, she could even clearly sense where the origin source was. As long as she could obtain this origin source, her master would be able to easily suppress that. Who is this? Qin Fengye coldly looked at the woman who had suddenly appeared. He quietly asked, "Who are you?" In their information, the fairy demon world did not have a second break world, but the person in front of them had a rule presence. She was a break world class. Lan Si. The woman's cold voice sounded. It was Lan Si, who had been in seclusion for a decade. Gunan had been in Purple Sky for a few months. A few years had passed in the fairy demon world. Lan Si had finally come out. She had been class 4. Her body and god personality had combined. Why are you wasting time with her? Kill her. Bailey Tuo came from behind. His gloomy voice followed him. He went straight for Lan Si. However, Lan Si was faster than him. She raised her hand and waved, and a blue light instantly enveloped Bailey Tuo. Bailey Tuo was shocked. He tried to use his rule to break the enemy's encirclement, but the blue light was like the toughest cloth. He could not break it. In the next moment, he felt suffocated. He realized what the blue light was. Heavy water. It was extremely heavy water. Every drop of water was like a meteor. They gathered together and covered the surface of his body. What kind of feeling was that? Bailey Tuo now knew. His whole body felt like it was being buried alive. He was buried in the center of the earth. Luckily, there were 2 of us. Bailey Tuo turned his head. He saw Qin Fengye running away. Stall her. I am going to steal the origin. Qin Fengye's voice was quicker than Bailey Tuo's. His actions were the same. He disappeared. Bailey Tuo's heart was filled with thousands of thoughts. At this moment, he wanted to escape and kill his teammate, Qin Fengye. Luckily, Lan Si was distracted by Qin Fengye's actions. Bailey Tuo was not crushed to death. Lan Si turned around anxiously. She realized that the other party's goal was to steal something. Now that Gunan was not here, she was responsible for stopping him. Qin Fengye's thoughts were much simpler. What did Bailey Tuo's life have to do with her? As long as she obtained the immortal demon world's origin, even if she sacrificed Bailey Tuo, she would be the one to be rewarded in front of Lady Zuozua. In front, it was right in front. The originally blue origin was now corroded by the shadow power. It was already in front of Qin Fengye. But Qin Fengye was also famous in the heavenly worlds. Even at the last moment, she did not relax. She was on guard against any traps that the enemy might have left. Even the action of seizing the origin was quick and careful. She even used the rule power to wrap her right hand. Then, she reached out to grab it. Even if there was a trap, even if she had to cripple her hand, she had to get the origin. Qin Fengye made up her mind. She did not hesitate to reach out. Success. She grabbed the origin. But at this moment, an inexplicable power suddenly appeared in the sky. It made Qin Fengye feel like the sky was collapsing. She looked up subconsciously, and a huge golden palm suddenly fell down, directly smashing her into minced meat. Chapter 242. Gunan's body was more than 5 meters tall. He was like a small giant. His body appeared in the sky. He came next to Qin Fengye's body. Qin Fengye was a top break world elite, but she was facing Gunan in Sky God mode. She could not fight back. Sky God Descent gave Gunan not only a rule resistance, but it also strengthened his speed and power. Gunan, who was in Sky God mode, had his body power reach a limit. Under the effect of the god nature, his body could break space. Ordinary people could not tolerate this. This was Sky God. Gunan picked up Qin Fengye like he was picking up a chicken. He tossed her aside and put his hand into the original. No! This angry roar came from Bailey Tuo. The snakehead man took advantage of Lan Si's distraction to find a chance to escape. But before he could be happy, he saw something like this. He did not know who Gunan was, but he knew what Gunan was doing. He was going to destroy the original. Yes, no matter if it was symbolic or real, it was the original of the fairy demon world. Gunan was going to destroy it. The gold hand stabbed into the light ball of the original. The original was invisible, but made a cracking sound. In the past, Gunan needed to study and analyze to figure out what the original was. Now he did not need to. That was because the evil god Hall told him the original was a god fire. It was something he was familiar with. Gunan did not know how to deal with the original, but the god fire was much clearer. Gunan's hand stirred gently, and the origin that had tormented him for a long time suddenly turned from black to blue, then back to black again, and finally separated into black and blue. The cracking sound in space was getting louder. The original was about to break. A wind blew past. Bailey Tuo saw his chance. He flashed and appeared behind Gunan. He slashed at the back of his neck. Bailey Tuo was mad, but he was a top break world elite. He had the best grasp of the situation. This golden guy killed Qin Fengye as soon as he appeared, and then he was busy destroying the source. What did this mean? The other party did not have much time left, and destroying the source was what he needed to do the most right now. Of course, he had to interfere with the other party. In Bailey Tuo's mediocre mind, he didn't even care about his own safety. All he could think of now was to kill. A living person. Food. His saber fell without any hindrance and landed heavily on Gunan's neck. Bailey Tuo's face revealed some joy, but in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. Clang! Bailey Tuo's saber slashed down on Gunan's body, but Gunan did not move at all. Even his golden skin was not damaged at all. Instead, the laws on the saber disappeared, and the saber itself broke apart. This is... Bailey Tuo seemed to have realized something. His eyelids twitched, but it was too late for him to pull himself away. Gunan coldly turned his body. His hand, which was still in the source, did not move. His other hand swung and slapped Bailey Tuo's face. The world breaker was not even able to turn his head. His entire head was sent flying. No, it was more accurate to say that even the space where his head was shattered by Gunnan's slap. Bailey Tuo's body slowly fell. There was still a black hole where his head should have been. It was like someone had taken a piece out of it. It was very weird. Gunnan's cold eyes turned back. The fairy demon world source was now very clear. The left side was blue, and the right side was black. It represented the part left by Zhuozhuo and the part that Gunnan had gone into. Under the control of Gunnan's sky god body, the two parts started to separate. The source was going to be split in half. That was Gunnan's goal. He wanted to break the fairy demon world source. He wanted to destroy the part that belonged to Zhuozhuo and leave only his own. With his current understanding of the origin and the powerful strength of the heavenly god's body, it was not impossible for him to do so. But Gunnan quickly looked regretful. He realized he could not achieve his goal. The reason was simple. He did not have enough time. Gunnan was not familiar with the source, but he was very familiar with the god fire. That was especially true of the fairy demon world, which had a master. The source was a combination of the god fire. If he broke the paper window, Gunnan would only need to glance at it. He knew it would take him at least a day to completely separate the source. How could his avatar state be maintained for so long? Right now, Gunnan could feel his power fading. The transformation was coming to an end. Gunnan had no choice but to restrain the regret in his heart and make a shocking decision. He suddenly punched out fiercely and blasted it directly at the source. Master! Yin Xiaoxiao appeared from the side. She looked at Gunnan in shock. She had been hiding at the side. She was the last line of defense. If not for Gunnan's appearance, she might have been the one to stop Qin Fengye. But it was also because of this that Yin Xiaoxiao could not understand Gunnan's actions. This punch of his was really going to destroy the origin. Why? He tried so hard to protect the source, and then he wanted to destroy it himself? And didn't Master know that once the source was destroyed, the world would collapse? Yin Xiaoxiao had almost fused with a human. She was the one who controlled the source. She knew the importance of the source. However, Gunnan did not hesitate at all. He threw a heavy punch, and the blue and black origin finally began to disperse completely. TSK, how cruel. As the source dissipated, a shadow gradually appeared in front of Gunnan. In order to prevent me from taking back the source, you would rather destroy this world? The shadow looked at Gunnan calmly and said. The left and right sides of the shadow were completely different. On the left side was a crazy girl, and on the right side was a gentle and kind young man. This was Zhuozhuo's shadow. After many years, Gunnan finally met him again. This was the superstar master that Gunnan met through a private dungeon when he was at the 3rd rank. Now that he was facing Zhuozhuo, Gunnan was not afraid. Firstly, he had the body of a sky god. His strength was not the same as before. Secondly, the shadow in front of him was just a remnant soul that Zhuozhuo left in the immortal demon world. If Zhuozhuo could come out, even if it was just a clone, it would be enough to snatch the source. Why would there be so much trouble? I might be able to protect the world, but I can't leave the source for you. Gunnan smiled. Besides, you should worry about yourself first. Oh, Zhuozhuo's expression was still calm. Even the girl's face did not change. It's that woman's turn in the next round, right? Gunnan chuckled and said, I heard you have an elder sister. Chapter 243. The world was shattering, and the heavens and earth were collapsing. The scene of Gunnan seizing the source was repeating even more violently now, and the sky even began to rain meteorites. Yin Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she watched this, and her heart was bleeding. She had spent more than 10 years of painstaking effort to establish 2 major alliances and 50 city-states. In this doomsday-like scene, it would be lucky to preserve even a tenth of them. And if this situation continued, in less than an hour, the entire world would completely collapse and all things would perish. Zhuozhuo's shadow had long since disappeared. Of course, she couldn't give Gunnan any answer, and Gunnan didn't just want to disgust her, he also wanted to divert Zhuozhuo's attention. Zhuozhuo's current situation was actually very easy to guess. It was nothing more than the most critical moment of the confrontation, and discovering that the battle that should have been in the bag still needed some help. As a result, some things that she originally didn't care about were now in demand. After all, the immortal demon world was Zhua's dojo. Although he needed the source, would there be other things left behind? Gu Nin didn't hesitate to destroy his future divine kingdom and destroy the source in order to completely dispel Zhua's covetous heart. In this situation, using Shadow Song's existence to divert the opponent's attention was naturally the best choice. As for whether revealing this information would cause Red's plan to fail, what did her life and death have to do with Gunan? Gunan couldn't wait for these two to fight to the death, so that he would have space to grow. The golden light on Gunan's body finally began to fade rapidly, and his body and strength also returned to normal. This was also the reason why Gunan was in a hurry to destroy the source. After exiting the Empyrean state, he couldn't destroy it even if he wanted to. The world's source wasn't a glass ball that anyone could break at will. Teacher, the world, is there really a chance to save it? Yin Xiaoxiao naturally heard Gunan's words before and asked a little anxiously. She had witnessed Gunan's power fading with her own eyes. If it was her teacher just now, it might have been possible, but now, of course, Gunan said without hesitation. Of course, I can't help it. The corner of Yin Xiaoxiao's mouth twitched. If it wasn't for the fact that the teacher in front of her was still her respected teacher, she really wanted to punch him in the face. The sky was still raining meteors. We have to rely on her. Gunan was not joking. He seriously pointed to the side where Lan Si was standing. Lan Si was shocked. She didn't expect that this kind of mission to save the world would fall on her. When Yin Xiaoxiao saw her dumbfounded expression, she was even more convinced that Gunan was talking nonsense. However, before she could ask again, Gunan spoke again. You started fusing with the divine spark from the 3rd rank. Now that you've broken through to the 4th rank, the divine spark will take the initiative to move closer to you, and divinity will also begin to form. Gunan spoke frankly with assurance. Inheriting a divine spark was not uncommon in the game. There weren't many that players could interfere with, but there were many NPC natives who obtained divine sparks by chance. Therefore, Gunan was quite familiar with the growth process of these gods. At the 3rd rank, they were still mortals. At the 4th rank, they began to transform into gods. The first strand of divinity was born in the divine spark, and the power of the word God was truly born. The reason why Lan Si could so easily suppress Bailey Tua was also related to the divine spark. Otherwise, she, who had just advanced to the 4th rank, would not be able to do this. So, Lan Si did not understand what Gunan was talking about. She was still confused. You can mend the sky at the 4th rank. Gunan looked exasperated. Before Lorenza became a god, she used to mend the sky. Don't tell me you don't know about that. Mend what? Oh, it should be called repairing the world's stone. Gunan used the language of the game, and Lan Si finally understood what he was talking about. In the world of gods, people believed that the core of the world was a world stone. Everything in the world was evolved from the world stone. Naturally, the worldview in the game was the same. The god that Lan Si used to worship, the flowering goddess Lorenza, had once participated in repairing the world stone when she was a demigod. Of course, the players would not use a tongue twister like repairing the world stone. They used the very visual mend the sky, so Gunan said it casually. Lan Si had grown up in the flowering goddess kingdom, so she was very familiar with the past deeds of the mother goddess. However, she had only heard about it. She was not at all familiar with the process. It's very simple. This was the time for the experienced Gunan to give her some pointers. The divine power of water naturally has the law of creation. If you use the divine power to repair the holes in this world, the fire seed might be born again. Fire seed was also a special term in the game. It referred to the unlit divine fire, which was the natural origin of this world. This time, Lan Si understood. As long as she continued to repair this world, the origin that Gunan had shattered could be reborn. This process sounded simple, but the difficulty lay in the fact that no one else had the ability to repair the world. Only Lan Si's divine power of water could. Yin Xiaoxiao only understood half of it, but she was the most anxious of them all. She immediately said, "Should we try?" "Let's try." Above the endless void, in the palace that seemed to stand eternally in the starry sky, two figures were calmly facing each other. On one side was the child-sized Wuzhua, half boy and half girl. On the other side was a woman covered in red makeup. If Gunan was here, he would definitely recognize her. This was the woman who told him where Shadow Song was and wanted him to protect her. She called herself Red. At this moment, Red sat quietly on the throne, while Zhuozhua stood motionlessly in front of her. In the silent palace, something seemed to float into it. Zhuozhua slowly opened her eyes. "A little friend heard that I have an older sister. Perhaps this is good news?" Good news that came late. Red didn't even bother to lift her eyelids. She said unhurriedly. Zhuozhua coldly stared at her. The sinister face of the girl on the left was becoming colder and colder. He had never underestimated this opponent of his from 10,000 years ago. After all, it was she who pushed him into the abyss at the moment when he was at his most proud. Then she easily obtained this world-dividing world, as if she was taking something out of her pocket. In the immortal demon world, it was she who took away one of the twins that he had set up in advance, making it impossible for him to obtain the complete origin. Now, even if he wanted to obtain an incomplete one, it was already impossible. And now his older sister, who should have died tens of thousands of years ago, was actually still alive. The coldness in Zhuozhua's eyes deepened. He even began to suspect that the little guy with the aura of the immortal demon world was also arranged by the other party. All the chess pieces were arranged, just waiting for him to take the bait. That little guy is also one of your people. Chapter 244. Gunan still didn't know that a certain existence that he had only met a few times had already identified him as a hedgehog. Of course, even if he knew, he probably wouldn't care because he couldn't wait to become a hedgehog so that no one would dare to covet him. But at the same time, Gunan wanted to have thoughts about others. Simply put, only I can bully others. Others can't bully me, let alone bully me. They can't even hinder me. Time passed day by day. The matter of the star world was temporarily put aside by Gunan. He concentrated on staying in the immortal demon world, commanding Lan Si to carry out the Mending the Heavens operation. Lan Si breaking through to the 4th rank still brought some benefits to Gunan. Not only did she have the ability to Mending the Heavens at the 4th rank, but also fused with the Godhead, causing Gunan's sin value to soar. 1960 points. This was the current number of Gunan's sin value. Lan Si's breakthrough increased by about 200 points of sin value. Adding up, this Godhead contributed nearly 1,000 points of sin value and could be considered to have successfully completed its mission. And Lan Si was also working hard to complete her mission. As a half-god emissary of Gunan, she naturally had to devote her energy to the divine nation. Originally, when she was in seclusion, the complicated affairs of the divine nation were all handed over to Yin Xiaoxiao, and now it was her turn to make up for it. The repair work of the immortal demon world was progressing bit by bit. With Gunan's precise command, coupled with the miraculous effect of the water divine power, they really persevered. The hole in the sky was filled piece by piece. The cracks in the space were also healing, and Yin Xiaoxiao had already organized the people to rebuild their homes. Regrettably, as Yin Xiaoxiao had predicted, in this natural disaster, more than half of the people of the immortal demon world died, and not even 10% survived. This is nothing. Gunan very calmly waved his hand. Male and female pair, forced birth. The human birth cycle is 1 year, and the growth cycle is only 15 to 20 years. We can afford to wait. The time flow of the immortal demon world was 10 times faster than the outside world. Of course, they could afford to wait. However, the words forced production that Gunan spoke of was enough to shock everyone. Even Yin Xiaoxiao, who already knew Gunan's way of doing things, couldn't help but be shocked. No ruler would treat his people like this. This was not ruling, this was breeding. Gunan was training people like animals. When he needed people, he would choose the method of forced matching, not considering the individual's wishes at all. Yin Xiaoxiao was silent, as if she was still digesting the meaning of Gunnan's words. But Gunnan didn't care at all. He really had nothing to lament about. All the players in the game did the same thing. In fact, after the Divine Kingdom stabilized, the players would set a limit on the lifespan of the population. Ordinary people beyond a certain age would be executed. If the resources provided to the elderly were used to nurture the young and strong, they would be able to obtain a higher energy yield. Technology, cultivation methods, basic resources, these can all be provided by us. Gunnan said, the people only need to cultivate. Cultivation is their only goal in life. Cultivation will bring them a longer lifespan, more resources, and the power to dominate others. Low-level people will be dominated in exchange for resources to reach a higher level. This will be the basic rule of the Divine Kingdom. Gunnan tried his best to describe the world he envisioned with the simplest words he could. It would be a world that was efficient enough, where everyone pursued cultivation. No one would enjoy themselves, and no one would have the time to relax. Vanity, ambition, love, and hatred would all become their motivation to move forward. Why create such a world? Yin Xiaoxiao asked blankly. She really couldn't understand. What was the point of such a monotonous and boring world? I need it, Gunnan said confidently. The overall strength of the Divine Kingdom determined the strength of his future strength. This reason was sufficient. Because Gunnan needed it, he wanted to control a part of the world and raise all the people inside like animals. He even wanted to brainwash them and make it their goal to cultivate to a higher level for the rest of their lives. Yin Xiaoxiao wasn't a modern person who accepted the idea of everyone is equal, but she still felt a little awkward. Seeing her hesitation, Gunnan simply turned to Lan Si and said, when the Divine Kingdom's repair work is completed, you can also participate in the cultivation of the people. Gunnan didn't say that Lan Si would directly take over. Her management ability wasn't enough to take charge. But as long as Lan Si participated, Yin Xiaoxiao had no choice but to make up her mind. Presumably, she didn't have any intention of falling out with Gunnan. Compared to Yin Xiaoxiao's hesitation, Lan Si was much more straightforward. She directly replied, okay. When Gunnan left the immortal and demon world, more than a month had passed outside. In other words, he stayed in the immortal and demon world for a full year. This was something that couldn't be helped. The direct destruction of the origin was not a joke. If not for Gunnan watching, even Lan Si and Yin Xiaoxiao would be in danger. Gunnan conveniently went to the Star World. The current Star World was even more chaotic than before. The flames of war had already begun to ignite in the major star fields. This was obviously Zuo's doing. He was trying to use this method to weaken Red's power. The Star Lords were the same as the gods that Gunnan knew. They used the power of the people in the Star World to strengthen the laws they could control. Of course, it was not impossible to rely on oneself. But the power of one person couldn't be compared to the power of a world, right? The young girl, No Return, had also disappeared. But Gunnan didn't have the time to look for her. Anyway, she couldn't find the coordinates of the immortal and demon world. Her position had nothing to do with Gunnan. After thinking for a moment, Gunnan's figure quickly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in his residence in the purple Civ Heaven. It had to be said that Gunnan was getting more and more familiar with the manipulation of tearing the void. He could even control his precise landing point to not deviate more than a meter. Continue to earn spirit stones. I need to rush to 2,500 sin points as soon as possible and advance to the 5th level. Gunnan didn't need to think too much. He quickly determined his next goal. He had a hunch that the active world's origin that he exchanged for spirit stones might not be useful after he reached the 5th level. This time, there was no need for others to explain. Gunnan himself was very clear about the principle. Other Star Lords could absorb the origin to strengthen themselves and the Star World. But Gunnan's God Kingdom was different. In the game, the most suitable way to advance after the first-class advancement was to kill a god. Searching for the world of gods needs to be put on the agenda. Gunnan knew better than anyone else that he would eventually head to the Pantheon world. Only the gods there were the best prey for him. Chapter 245. Purple Sky was a very open plain, but it was also a society with a strict hierarchy. So, when Gunan bought a house, people of this level came and went. Normally, there were very few conflicts. He did not expect to encounter something like this when he came back. "Master!" The maid ran over in a panic. She quickly reported, "Outside, there are a few big shots searching." Gunan frowned slightly and waved his hand to get the maid to leave before he walked outside. Just as the maid had said, there was a small team carefully searching outside. Although they were worried about the identity of the people who lived there, they did not do too much. Still, they made a lot of noise. Plus, the loud noise did not seem like it was caused by a search. "What is going on?" Gunan asked Luo-Wen. Gunan's neighbor was not like him. Luo-Wen lived in Purple Sky all year round. He spent most of his time at home doing shameless things. Of course, he was shocked. Looking at Luo-Wen's face, it seemed he had been interrupted while doing something. "It's the Seven-Star Alliance," Luo-Wen said quietly. "They said they were looking for a woman who stole something. I don't know if it's true or not." Gunan had been in Purple Sky for a long time, so he knew what the Seven-Star Alliance was. The Astral Gate was an open organization. They recruited people from all planes, but that did not mean they were in a state of disunity. In fact, in the Astral Gate, there were core and periphery organizations. Only loyal members could join the core organization. People like Gunan could only stay on the periphery. There were many organizations inside the Astral Gate. There were no less than 100 organizations, big or small. The Seven-Star Alliance was one of them, and it was very famous. Gunan couldn't help but smile when he heard Luo-Wen. The Seven-Star Alliance was not so bored that they would go to the Break World area to search. Luo-Wen's good deed had been interrupted, and he was angry. At this time, the members of the Seven-Star Alliance also saw Gunan appear. Soon, someone came up to him and asked if he had seen a woman. The attitude of the people from the Seven Stars Alliance was very respectful and professional. Not only did they take out the detailed information of the people they were investigating, but they even had images and photos. Gunan glanced at the ordinary-looking woman named Fong Jing and shook his head. He really didn't know this person, but he was also a bit puzzled. With such detailed information, she still managed to escape. Was it because the Seven-Star Alliance was too useless, or was there something strange about this woman? Many Break World people showed up. The Seven-Star Alliance people went to ask them, but they were disappointed. None of them were able to provide any valuable information. It wasn't until they retracted their team and left that Luo-Wen said with emotion, "This woman is not simple. If it wasn't for someone's help, I would definitely have kept her." This was a gathering place for Break World people. It was not easy to hide one's whereabouts there. Luo-Wen's eyes lit up as he spoke. Luo-Wen was a very special Break World person. He didn't grow up from a small plane of existence. He was born in Purple Sky, so his personality didn't have much of a murderous nature. He was crazy about all kinds of women, but he wasn't a heartless person. He treated every woman with sincerity. The collection Luo-Wen was talking about was keeping a woman next to him. Then, he would use his long life to accompany her until she died. In the end, he would make her into a permanent specimen. Gunan wasn't interested in Luo-Wen's special hobby. He calmly turned around and went back to his room. Even Luo-Wen didn't notice that the moment Gunan closed the door, the shadow power had completely surrounded the room. In front of him stood a woman. Gunan didn't know this face, but he had seen the image. Plus, he was very familiar with the other's presence. Looks could be changed, and names could be faked. Only the special presence of the soul could not be fooled. Gunan had been in contact with the other soul before, so the disguise could not be hidden from him. "Oh, it's you." Gunan used shadow power to lock down the area and said, "Last time, you found Star World. This time you found me. What is the relationship between you and that Uncle Purple Lightning?" Gunan's two questions didn't seem to be connected. The only connection was that they were both asking the same question. The person who appeared in front of Gunan was the person who had gone to the private instance dungeon with him. She had used her own power to defeat Star Master Purple Will. When Gunan returned to Star World, Purple Will had sent a part of her soul to possess Duanmuin. She had tried to lead Gunan to the Duanmu family's ancestral grave. Gunan had reason to believe that her goal was Purple Lightning. Purple Will was not surprised by Gunan's question. She had shown herself because she had been prepared for this. Purple Will's face returned to normal. Then, she chose to answer the second question. Purple Lightning is my son. Hey, Gunan suddenly clapped his hands. That's an unexpected answer. Looking at the two of you, I thought you were his daughter. No matter what, the middle-aged Purple Lightning was much more mature than Purple Will. His personality was the same as well. Moreover, the plot of a daughter saving her father seemed more reliable. Purple Will's expression remained cold in the face of Gunan's exaggerated statement. They know you're in the purple civ sky, so they sent me to find you. Their location might have already been exposed. Zwazwa's people will come looking for you soon. Help, why should I help? Gunan interrupted her before she could finish speaking. Purple Will was taken aback. She hadn't expected Gunan's answer to be so straightforward. She said forcefully, that person in Star World asked you to protect this generation's blood ancestor. You agreed. Can I go back on my word? Gunan asked, a strange expression on his face. Players never cared about what they promised. If you wanted them to accept a mission, you had to give them a suitable reward. Of course, in the end, Shadow Song's ability to enter the Starry Sky path was useless to Gunan. He could rely on origin crystals to advance to the 5th stage, and his efficiency wouldn't be low. But once he reached the 5th stage, he would be able to enter the inner world. What use would Shadow Song have then? If they were useless, they would discard them. This was how players treated equipment, pets, and NPCs. This was the first time Purple Will had seen someone go back on their word in such a serious manner. She took a deep breath and stared at Gunan. When Zwazwa takes the Star World, do you think you'll get anything out of it? There's no harm in that. Gunan didn't seem to care. In any case, the origin of the immortal demon world had been destroyed, and the coordinates were scattered to who knew where. Zwazwa wouldn't be able to cause him any trouble. Purple Will was completely helpless against this stubborn fellow. Anger gradually appeared on her face. Then what do you want in exchange for your help? It's very simple, Gunan said matter-of-factly. I just need money. I need 100,000 origin crystals. Purple Will's eyes widened. As if afraid that Gunan would go back on his word, she quickly spoke. Chapter 246. 100,000 Spirit Stones. This was what Gunan currently needed. Spirit Stones could be exchanged for the same amount of active source. The only thing that mattered was the number of Spirit Stones. However, as Gunan's sin value increased, the benefits of active source gradually decreased. According to Gunan's estimation, he needed about 500 points of sin value to reach the 5th stage, which was roughly 100,000 Spirit Stones. After reaching the 5th stage, Gunan suspected that the active source would no longer have any effect on his sin value. Based on the evil god's temple's behavior, it was normal to change the method of obtaining sin value at each stage. Now that Gunan looked back, everything seemed particularly clear. The first stage was a normal instance dungeon. The second stage was reincarnation. The third stage was a private instance dungeon obtained from sin events and translation. And the fourth stage was the active source. Although there were intersections, the main body was indeed like this. If it weren't for the influence of a divine spark, Gunan might have spent more time in it and realized the changes earlier. However, it didn't matter now. Right now, Gunan was only 100,000 Spirit Stones away from reaching the 5th stage. Therefore, Gunan's price for Purple Will was 100,000 Spirit Stones. Any more was useless, he couldn't spend it. As for accepting Purple Will's employment to help rescue Shadow Song and Purple Lightning, Gunan didn't have any psychological resistance. After all, it was a mission, and Purple Will's mission wasn't as troublesome as the Astral Gate. That's settled then, Gunan said to Z. Can we pay first before we start working? In your dreams. In a remote little world, Gunan and Purple Will appeared in a loft. You really don't want to consider paying first? Gunan was still diligently persuading. If I pay first, my strength will increase, and I'll have more confidence in rescuing them. Purple Will was still expressionless. She calmly walked out of the room and said, I'm going to prepare the materials. We'll leave in 3 days. As for Gunan's suggestion to pay first, Purple will chose to completely ignore it. What a pity. Gunan shook his head. Paying in advance would allow Gunan's strength to increase tremendously. This was true. Once Gunan's strength increased tremendously, his chances of rescuing others would increase tremendously. This was also true. Only after paying first would Gunan raise his strength and still go to help. Of course, this was just a casual remark. Knowing the player's character, it was normal for them to take the money without doing anything. Some of them even killed NPCs for equipment after taking the money. However, Gunan was only joking. He knew that it was impossible for Purple Will to pay him in advance. The reason was very simple. Both sides were the best choice right now, and it was not a pure one-sided market. For some reason, Purple Intent could only look for Gunan's help, and it would be difficult for Gunan to find another task with a reward of 100,000 source crystals. The purchasing power of origin crystals was very strong, especially for Break World people. Under normal circumstances, a Break World person would not be able to spend a few hundred origin crystals a year. Gunan could eat active original like it was candy, but other Break World people could not. Every time they observed it, it would take them a few years to learn it. At the end of the day, Purple Intent was a Star Lord, which was why he could take out 100,000 origin crystals at once. After Purple Will left, Gunan calmed down. He started to prepare for this mission. He had to analyze and calculate every mission. That was a habit Gunan had developed over the years. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning were not in a good situation. Ever since Zwazwa learned of Shadow Song's existence, he had been looking for the two of them, but he had not been able to find them. After all, Zwazwa had just found out, and Shadow Song was in the dark. He had been on guard for a long time. He could not expose himself. But Zwazwa was someone who could compete with Red for Star World. He had many tricks up his sleeve. Even if he could not find Shadow Song, he could still achieve his goal. He did not need to find Shadow Song. He just needed Shadow Song to die. So, Shadow Song and Purple Lightning were trapped. They were trapped in a dream. Dreamless world. Gunan flipped through the information in his hands page by page, but he frowned slightly because this small plane was too special. Mysterious Dream World was a small world at the edge of the sky. Like all the small worlds at the edge, it was between the surface world and the inner world. But Mysterious Dream World was special because it did not have the characteristics of an inner world. It was still a normal world that could not be reset, but it had the characteristics of an inner world. Yes, it was just a world-class plane, but it had the characteristics of an inner world. It was the center of the world. The light balls in the inner world were the core carriers of countless planes in the sky. They were the internal manifestations, so they were called the center of the world. Mysterious Dream World was the same. Here, you can find the manifestation of the dreams of countless worlds and countless living beings. Simply put, all the creatures gathered in this plane in the form of a dream. Gunan did not understand the principle behind this, but this did not hinder his current mission, to find Shadow Song and Purple Lightning in the Mysterious Dream World and kill them. As long as he killed the creatures in the Mysterious Dream World, he could destroy their dreams and let them leave. This was the simplest method. But the more troublesome part was that when people were dreaming, their minds were not necessarily clear. In fact, most people would completely lose their ability to judge and act according to their instincts. What was instinct? If you wanted to kill me, I would kill you. That was instinct. If you tried to explain that you were actually dreaming and that I killed you to save you, that was complete nonsense. No one would believe you. I can't communicate with them. I can only kill them. After going through the mission information, Gunan quickly determined the conditions for his victory. What were the conditions for failure? More awkwardly, the conditions for failure were also the deaths of Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. Creatures in the Mysterious Dream World could be killed using a special method, wiping out their consciousness and causing their bodies to enter a state of brain death. To put it bluntly, what entered the Mysterious Dream World was a strand of the creature's soul. Since it was a soul, there had to be a way to trace it back to the source and destroy the main body. What Gunan and Purple Will needed to do was find Shadow Song and Purple Lightning before they were killed by Zwazwa's people. How difficult! Gunan shook his head helplessly. These conditions meant that not only was the difficulty of the mission high, but there was also an element of luck. And the element of luck meant that there was a time limit. Gunan and Purple will have to make every second count and find Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. If they were unlucky, Shadow Song might have already died to Zuazua's hands before they even entered the mysterious dream world. Chapter 247. 100,000 Spirit Stones was not easy to earn. Even with Gunan's insane speed at completing missions, it was the equivalent of half a year's worth of hard work. Now, he had to do it all in one go. It was not going to be easy. 3 days passed. Purple will return to the small building and informed Gunan that he could leave. They were in a small plain near the dream world. It was a stepping stone to enter. The dream world was a plain that not even world breakers could enter directly. Purple will prepared as soon as she received the news. When she contacted Gunan, she still needed 3 days to open the tunnel. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to enter the dream world with one's real body. After all, one's real body could retain consciousness. That was a big advantage in the dream world. Fortunately, Zuazua's people were facing the same problem. Everyone was on the same starting line. Be careful of the dream world's nightmare. Purple will warn Gunan before entering the dream world. I know. Gunan nodded. He was not arrogant enough to look down on everything. On the contrary, before every mission, he would do a detailed analysis of the mission's background. He would not miss out on important information like this. Nightmare was the only native creature in the dream world. It was a strange existence that existed between reality and illusion. The special nature of the dream world was that it was often used to kill powerful people that were hard to kill. It was also the source of dream power users. The reason these dream power users could do this was because of the existence of nightmare. The whole process was simple. Find a way to make the enemy dream. Create a god soul in the dream world, and then guide the nightmare to eat them. Those who were eaten by the nightmare would die immediately. Their god soul would be destroyed. In that case, dreaming was still a very dangerous thing. Fortunately, the nightmare would not attack the dreamer unless it was guided by a dream master, or someone else entered. The nightmare's attack is mainly targeted at people who have distracting thoughts. Purple will clearly knew more than Gunan. Don't worry about those two dreaming. We are in more danger. The dreamer acted on instinct, so of course, there weren't many distracting thoughts. Seeing that Gunan was already prepared, Purple did not say anything else. Instead, she said bluntly, "Let's go. Don't split up. We need to have a greater chance of success." The Lost Dream world was very special. Its entire body was a space of nothingness, but its interior was divided into pieces of various sizes, some even overlapping with each other. Just figuring out the path to the dream world was enough to give many a headache. In this kind of situation, the only way to find traces of Shadow Song and his companion was to search the area one by one. There was no better way. The first space was not too big. With their speed, they finished searching in a short while. "No, I don't have one either. Let's go to the next area." Purple did not mind. There were at least a few hundred regions in the dreamy world. How could he be so lucky as to encounter the first one? Wait. Gunan did not move immediately. Instead, he casually struck a corner. Very quickly, a dull roar was heard, and it pounced towards Gunan and Liwuyo. This roar, which seemed to be both real and fake at the same time, caused the purple intense expression to change in an instant. A nightmare shapeshifter. This guy, Gunan, had actually discovered the nightmare shapeshifter in this area and deliberately awakened it. Purple had no idea what Gunan was doing. Of course, this did not affect her actions at all. She was running for her life. In a lost dream world, nightmares were almost immortal existences. Even if they were killed, they would quickly revive, so fighting them was meaningless. Fortunately, there was only one nightmare shapeshifter in each area of the dreamy world, and nightmares could not travel through space. After the two of them quickly left the area, the nightmare shapeshifter could only roar angrily. "What the hell are you doing?" Purple said angrily. She did not understand what Gunan was doing. Was it fun? Of course it's to cause trouble for Zua's people. Gunan said without any intention of being in the wrong. Purple Will was taken aback, but then she began to understand what Gunan was trying to say. Nightmares were usually in a state of deep sleep, so the two intruders had always been careful not to disturb them. Once a nightmare shapeshifter was awakened, it would not be easy to fall asleep again. Usually, it would have to feast in its own area before stopping. The principle that dream masters used to kill their enemies was actually to find a way to awaken a nightmare shapeshifter in the area that the enemy had entered, so that the nightmare shapeshifter could eat the enemy. Zwazwa's people, will they coincidentally be behind us? Who can say for sure? Gunan shrugged. But unless they're moving at the same pace as us, they'll definitely run into areas that we've been to before. As long as we can disrupt their movements, it'll be worth it. Gunan laughed. It's no trouble at all. Of course, Purple Will did not understand the last half of Gunan's sentence, but she understood what he meant. In any case, the two of them would not suffer any losses from awakening a nightmare shapeshifter. It was indeed no trouble at all. Shadow Song and Zwi could not travel through areas of their own accord. Those who would search for them from area to area would be Zwa's people. This was indeed a good deal. Of course, this would inevitably lead to the deaths of many innocent people. But did Gunan seem like someone who would care about such things? Purple Will understood Gunan's meaning. So, in the subsequent search, the two of them would purposely awaken the nightmare shapeshifter before they left. With their standards, they were prepared in advance, so there was not much danger until they arrived at another area. This was also a small area, but what was different from before was that it was clearly scattered with villages and houses. The dream world was supposed to be chaotic. There was only one possibility for something to appear in this area. The nightmare shapeshifter was awake. Be careful, Purple Will said immediately, and then her figure suddenly disappeared. Gunan frowned as he looked at the spot where Purple Will had disappeared. This was not a method of movement that he knew of. Instead, it was as if the space itself had been moved. Has the nightmare shapeshifter been awakened? Shadow power reverberated around Gunan's body, and his heart was beating slightly. After such a long period of recuperation, Deity's descent had long since cooled down, but Gunan was not in a hurry to use it. Under Gunan's vigilance, the nightmare shapeshifter came. Gunan felt the scene in front of him change, and he found himself in a completely different place. The nightmare shapeshifter's attack extracted the deepest part of a person's heart, causing them to sink into it. If they stayed in the illusion for too long, they would naturally have to stay inside. The illusion could be their own, or it could be someone else's. The scene that Gunan was currently experiencing was clearly someone else's. Atop a snow-covered mountain peak, the person who appeared in front of him was someone he had never expected to see. Chapter 248. In a certain area near Gunan and Yilingchun, three silhouettes entered, and immediately there was a huge commotion. Another awakened nightmare. This is the sixth one of the men said angrily. They were the three dream masters who had been ordered by Zwazwa to find Shadow Song. Not long after they started looking for him, they encountered a series of problems. Dream World Masters were a special profession. They were not very strong. There was only one break world out of the three of them, but they were the ones who knew the most about dreams. In a special place like the mysterious dream world, they were not afraid of the powerful break world. That was because it was their home ground. It must have been those two, another man said. The other man beside him said in a deep voice. His appearance was somewhat similar to that of the first man. Perhaps they were brothers. Before they left the area, they woke up the nightmare. An old voice sounded in their ears. It was the third person who spoke. It was an old woman with white hair. Her face was wrinkled like a ravine, but she looked very energetic. She was a break world-class dream master called Granny Tuesday. Next to her were the Zhao brothers. They kept making a mark to calm the restless nightmare demon. Dream masters had many ways to deal with nightmares. It was much easier than laymen. It took a lot of effort to calm down the nightmare. The older brother of the Zhao brothers, Big Zhao, went to Granny Tu and said, "Granny, we can't keep doing this. Should we create some trouble for those two?" Dream masters were very powerful in the mysterious dream world. Even Big Zhao, who was just a transcendent, could discover the existence of Gunan and Big Zhao. Granny Two's face was expressionless. She smiled and said, "They're already in trouble." The person standing in front of Gu Nan was Red. To be more accurate, this person was not the Red that Gunan had seen. It was the Red from when she was young. Her young face and petite body showed her true age. Even the powerful star Master rarely maintained a little girl's appearance. "Are you leaving?" Young Red coldly looked at Gunan and said in a low voice. Red seemed to recognize Gunan, but Gunan knew very well that Red didn't recognize him, but the original owner of this illusion. In other words, Gunan had replaced that person's existence. Who could it be? Shadow, Song, Violet Lightning, and even Violet were all possibilities. Perhaps it was someone who had come to the dream realm before, and, coincidentally, Red existed in their memories. An indescribable emotion welled up in Gunan's heart. Guilt, pity, regret. These were also the emotions of the original owner of the illusion. Gunan, who had understood the dreamless world, would naturally not be fooled. Dreams were very suitable for killing people invisibly, so it had been researched a lot. Methods to deal with nightmare illusions had long been summarized. At the end of the day, there was only one word: disbelief. As long as one's willpower was strong enough, one would be able to break free from the illusions in the illusion. However, memories were gradually surging up about this place, about himself, about the girl in front of him. Red. Was she really called Red since 10,000 years ago? The scene in front of Gu Nan seemed to blur for a moment, and then immediately became clear again. The next moment, Gu Nan smashed his fist forward without hesitation, hitting young Red's petite face. In this illusion, shadow power, magic breaker, equipment, and skills were all stripped away, but at least Gunan still had his own body, and he could still fight with his fists. Young Red didn't seem to expect Gu Nan to attack her, and to attack her at that. She stared at Gu Nan with shock and despair. The indescribable sense of guilt grew even stronger, almost making it hard for Gu Nan to breathe, as if attacking Red was a heinous crime. However, this forced sense of guilt did not affect Gunan's movements at all. His gaze was still cold and calm, and his fist did not tremble at all. Crack! Another punch landed, and the poor child's brow bone was instantly broken. Her entire body was sent flying by Gunan's punch, and she fell heavily into the snow. Her face was stained with blood, and pure white snowflakes fell on her cheeks. The mixture of white and red gave the scene a different kind of beauty. Why? Red, who had fallen to the ground, was still staring at Gunan. Her voice was full of confusion, but it soon stopped. That was because Gunan had already taken a step forward and broken her neck. Whose illusion was this? And what relationship that person had with Red, Gunan didn't care at all. Gunan wasn't a curious child, and he didn't want to become a famous detective. He just wanted to complete his mission and get paid. You killed her. A voice came from beside Gunan. Gunan turned around and saw Purple Will, and behind her was a group of people he didn't know. Their attire was different from now, but their faces were not much different. Perhaps after a certain stage, Purple Will's appearance had been fixed. Purple Will was roaring at Gunan, and a thought emerged in Gunan's mind. I'm not acting as Purple Will, so who is it? This thought only lingered for a moment, and Gunan's body moved again, and he punched again. The emotions became more and more intense, and Gunan even felt like his body was about to explode. The countless emotions reflected directly in his mind were enough to make him dizzy. But Gunan didn't faint, and he was as awake as ever. The fist landed firmly on Purple Will's face, and Gunan brought her directly into the group of people surrounding him. He then punched out mercilessly. On the other side, the three Dream Masters found Shadow Song and Red much easier than Gunan and the rest. The three of them didn't even need to look around. They just used a secret technique to search the entire area, and it was even more efficient than doing it themselves. Purple Will, a Star Master from the Purple Civ Sky. He's very experienced, but he hasn't found a suitable astral world. Granny 2 took this opportunity to tell the Zhao brothers about their opponent. Is he a Star Master? Second brother Zhao's voice was a little low. The two brothers were transcendents, after all. Facing an opponent 2 realms higher than them, they still felt a little guilty. Although a Star Master without an astral world was essentially a world breaker with complete rules, he was still a Star Master. If they were to be categorized by rank, the two people facing off in the astral world were actually just Star Masters. However, their astral worlds were powerful enough for them to dominate an entire world. Granny 2, of course, understood what second brother Zhao was thinking. She said, "So we definitely can't focus on this person." "Oh, the other one isn't easy to deal with, right?" Big brother Zhao asked. Through the dreamy world, they already knew the identity of their enemy. The name Gu Nian was well known among Masters with subordinates. The failure of Gu Nian and Shang Rong's operation made many people feel confused and even panicked. Even Master Shang Rong, one of the 5 attainments monuments, had died at his hands. Other than Master Zhuozhua, who else could defeat him? However, Granny 2 revealed mysterious smile. "Gunan, he has a weakness." "What weakness?" At this moment, the Zhao brothers' curiosity was aroused. Chapter 249. Young. Granny 2's words were powerful and resonant, but the Zhao brothers were somewhat puzzled. To be so powerful at such a young age, was that not an advantage? Although many young people were impulsive, that person did not have such problems. His tactics and mind were more outstanding than many old foxes. Gunan does not have those problems that young people have, but he is still young, Granny 2 said in a low voice. Being young means that it is impossible for him to know what happened in the past, so he will be curious. In front of a nightmare, curiosity will cost you your life. Granny 2 was right. Purple had already broken free from the nightmare's attack. She had even chased it away, but the attack on Gu Nan was still ongoing. The nightmare was like a huge bubble, and its attack was very interesting. It separated a part of its body from the bubble and wrapped it around its target. The illusionary world was indeed a very special place. Gunan's real body was actually dragged into the nightmare's bubble like a soul. Purple Will, who had already broken free from the bubble, could see the illusion that Gu Nan was experiencing through the bubble. She could tell at a glance whose illusion it belonged to. Zhuozhua. More accurately, it was Zhuozhua's previous self. When Zhuozhua was still a normal boy, that winter, he experienced that unforgettable choice. Purple Will's thoughts seemed to return to that winter, when she saw Zhuozhua defeat Red, and then resolutely embarked on a journey to find her sister. After that, they never met again, because the next time they met, Zhuozhua had already become that monster made of a man and a woman. Oh, back then, he was not called Zhuozhua. Even that name came later. Zhuozhua, there was no right. Could Gunan bear Zhuozhua's emotions from back then? Faced with such a dilemma, could he have a clear conscience and finally break free from the illusion? Purple Wool was very worried about this until she clearly saw what Gunan was doing in the projection on the bubble. One punch, another punch. Gunan had completely inherited Zhuozhua's body from back then. He did not have any power of laws, nor did he have any comprehension of laws. He only had his fists. Red's neck had been broken by him, and Purple Yi's face had also been beaten black and blue. Even the dozen or so people who had arrived with Purple, he had not been able to escape his fists. Of course, in a situation where there was no difference in strength, it was somewhat difficult for Gu Nan to fight 1 against 10. He was in a state where he was being ganged up on. In the face of Red's death, the dozen or so people were enraged. They poured their anger into their fists and punched Gunan. But Gunan didn't even bother to respond. 2 of his front teeth were knocked out, half of his ear was torn off, and his left leg was fractured by someone's kick. He even had to rely on his right leg to move. He looked extremely comical. But Gunan's expression didn't change at all. He just focused on beating people up. He stared at one, and after killing him, he started beating the next one. The first to fall was, of course, Purple Yi. She was Gunan's first target. Then the second, and the third, Purple Yi, who was outside the bubble, was frozen. She could not imagine what Gunan was doing. It was against all common sense. Being in an illusion, one couldn't just mutter, "This is all fake." Even if it was not one's own memory, the memories and emotions of the original owner would be poured into the target's body. There was no way to resist. Granny, do you mean to let Gunan sink into Master's was memory? Zhao Air quickly understood what Granny 2 meant and was shocked. No, it's sinking into one of the memories. Granny 2 smiled leisurely. Emotions will be poured into him, and memories will flow in. Granny 2 understood the Nightmare Lord very well. The Nightmare Lord's attack is the highest level of a dream master like me. After all, the Zhao brothers were not world breakers. They didn't know much about Nightmare, which was a specialty of the Lost Dream world. But they still nodded. If what Granny 2 said was true, then Nightmare was indeed very strong. To a dream master, how to make their target sink into a dream was their main concern. Using the target's own memory could easily be seen through by the target because of the details. Using someone else's memory, however, had the problem of immersion. How to make the target feel that they were the person in the illusion and not in the illusion. The commonly accepted view was to use the agitation of emotions to make the target think. In the process of thinking, the original owner's memory would be implanted bit by bit. The whole world knows about the fight between Master and that person in Galaxy World. Who wouldn't be curious about their past? Granny 2 had a confident smile on her face. Unless it's someone who already knows about it. With Gunan's young age, he definitely doesn't know. That's his biggest weakness. Huh? Before Granny 2 could finish her sentence, she suddenly froze. The Zhao brothers were still nodding at the side, looking at this senior with reverence in their eyes. They were immediately shocked by this scene, thinking that Granny 2 had been ambushed. This was the Lost Dream world. It was not strange for strange things to happen here. Granny, are you okay? Big brother, Zhao rushed forward and shook Granny 2's body. If she was really in a dream, this method would work in the early stages. I'm fine. The silver-haired Granny 2 felt like her body was about to fall apart. She spoke with difficulty. The Zhao brothers heaved a sigh of relief. They were about to ask her what happened, but Granny 2 spoke first. Gunan is free. Granny 2's voice was filled with helplessness. The Zhao brothers stared blankly for a moment and didn't know what to say. It was not a big deal to say that a dream could not trap someone. After all, this was the profession with the most variables. However, Granny 2 was just analyzing Gunan's weakness. In the blink of an eye, he had escaped. How awkward was that? Granny 2's expression changed. Finally, she said in a low voice, "Let me see how he escaped from the illusion." It's also a preparation for the next attack. Even though it was just an excuse that Granny 2 came up with, it made sense. Dream Masters could directly communicate with the source of the Lost Dream world. That was why Granny 2 could use the incubus to prepare such a luxurious meal for Gunan. Now, it was not difficult for her to communicate with the Lost Dream world again and obtain information about Gunan's actions in the illusion. I'll switch to that person's point of view. In this memory, he should have met him first. Granny 2 switched to Red's point of view and tried to see Gunan's actions from start to finish. However, she could only see the beginning and not the end. Chapter 250. A nightmare's attack is not as scary as I thought it would be. Gunan quickly escaped from the illusion. He was also wondering about the power of the illusion. In the information he received, the nightmare was very dangerous. Often, break world, people who entered the dream world with their real bodies died there. Purple looked at him strangely. She thought to herself, if you do this, then no illusion will work. Indeed, if anyone could be like Gunan and kill without saying a word, then this sort of bewildering illusion would really be useless. But why could he do it? Purple did not understand. How could someone be so determined to exclude Zwa's memories? Was he not curious at all? She was the top existence below the 13 skies. She could ignore the home advantage and suppress Red in the Galaxy world. She was a superstar master. Gunan was familiar with the past of such a powerful person. As long as he had the slightest thought, the memories would surge out like a tidal wave. At this moment, Purple will realize that this illusion was probably not a coincidence. Instead, it was deliberately set up by someone. It's a dream master. Purple told Gunan, Zwa controls Silent Destruction Sky. I cannot believe she has a dream master. Dream Masters were special existences. Gunan did not know about them, but because he was going to enter the eternal dream world, he had to learn about them. People who were born with dream rule powers had to go through special training to become a Dream Master. It was normal for there to be very few of them. That was why Purple could not find help at the moment. He did not expect Zwa to have one. Silent Destruction Sky. Gunan caught another piece of information. 36 skies and 72 worlds. You must have heard of this, right? Yes. After getting Gunan's confirmation, Purple sighed. That was what they said in the past. Now, there are only 29 Sky-class planes left. Zwa's Silent Destruction Sky is one of them. 36 skies and 72 worlds had become a general term. The status of a star boundary was ultimately determined by the strength of the Star Lord. Over the past 10,000 years, some heaven-grade astral realms have been removed from this list, and some world-grade astral realms had also been added. In the end, the number of astral realms had stabilized at 29. After listening to Ziyi's explanation, Gunan nodded silently. He realized that the identity of Zwa and Red was not what he had expected. According to the usual plot, Red was the realm lord who was in charge of a realm, while Zwa was undoubtedly the villain who was lurking in the dark, plotting to take over her foundation. But in reality, Zwa was a Star Lord of a higher level than Red. Rather than calling it a conspiracy to seize Red's foundation, it would be better to call it an invasion that was open and above board. In other words, you and Zwa have always known each other, right? Gunan recalled how the two of them had pretended to be strangers back in the private dungeon. Of course, Purple said casually. It's no secret that Zwa is in Nirvana heaven. We all thought that he had already forgotten what had happened in the past, but who would have thought? The Battle of the Astral Realm was ultimately related to the grievances of tens of thousands of years ago, but Gunan just waved his hand. He had no interest in the backstory of these NPCs. Continue. Gunan said. Purple thought that he wanted her to continue talking about secrets from tens of thousands of years ago, but before she could speak, Gunan had already dashed out. Since the Nightmare Lord had been chased away, they naturally had to continue searching. What a strange person. Purple shook her head and turned to run in the other direction, but she immediately stopped. In that direction, there were clearly two familiar figures roaming about. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. Found them. They found them. Granny Two's voice rang out in another area. Someone is attacking the Dream Spirit. It must be them. The Dream Spirit referred to the soul of the dreamer in the Dreamland world. This was a term unique to Dream Masters. Dream Masters had the ability to communicate with the consciousness of the Dreamland world, so Granny 2 was the first to notice the abnormality. Then, Granny, should we chase after them? Old Zhao carefully asked. Normally, chasing after them would not have required much thought, but this time, their opponents were a bit weird. He did not forget that when Granny 2 went to check out Gunan's illusion, she almost fell on her, but, of course, Granny 2 did not immediately make a decision. After a while, she said, Chase. This was the first time Gunan had fought against both Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. More accurately, he was only fighting against Purple Lightning. Shadow Song's power recovered quickly, but he was still a step away from breaking the world. In front of elites like Gunan and Purple, Shadow Song had no power to fight. But the power that Purple Lightning displayed was beyond Gunan's expectations. This swordsman had been sleeping for 10,000 years. When he woke up, he used a sword mind that he had nurtured for 10,000 years. He displayed a power that shocked even Gunan. What was surprising was that now, he was doing exactly the same. Purple Lightning stood in front of Shadow Song with his sword. As a dream spirit, he could not recognize Gunan or Purple. He only knew how to fight based on his own instincts. It did not involve any rules. It was the purest sword in the world, and it came slashing down with shocking speed. The purple sword light slashed Gunan's body. It left a wound so deep that bones could be seen. Blood splashed everywhere. Gunan paused in surprise, waiting for the heretic god's body to recover on its own. Then, he saw Violet Lightning's figure quickly pounce towards Violet Will. Purple Will's body was surrounded by dark, purple lines. The light was shining. It bounced purple lightning's sword away, but she was also knocked back. Although she was a star master, she did not have an astral world. She had been injured by Zwazwa before, so she could not gain the upper hand against purple lightning. When you go crazy, you'll even kill your own mother. TSK. Purple Will couldn't help but glare at Gunan. However, Gunan's figure had already disappeared. Gunan had an innate sense of the situation on the battlefield. He knew what he needed to do, and he also knew that his skill set was the most suitable for an assassin. His target, Shadow Song. Purple Lightning suddenly turned around, stabbing his sword at Shadow Song. However, he was too late. Or rather, it wasn't that he was too late. Gunan simply ignored his attack. Gunan appeared from the darkness. In pursuit of extreme speed, he didn't even use his sword. Instead, he reached out, grabbed Shadow Song's neck, and lightly twisted. The sound of bones snapping was incomparably clear. The petite Shadow Song slowly fell to the ground. Purple Lightning's sword easily stabbed into Gunan's chest, but Gunan simply grinned. Then, he suddenly disappeared, leaving Purple Lightning and Purple Will staring at each other. Chapter 251. Gunan leisurely floated to the side, completely ignoring the mother and son fight below. Gunan only cared about his own reward. Purple Will's life and death were not within the scope of his concern. The rescue mission was issued through the Astral Gate. Even if Purple Will died here, Gunan was not afraid of not getting the origin crystals. Now that Shadow Song had been rescued, as long as Purple Lightning's dream spirit was killed, Gunan's reward would not be able to escape. Even if Purple Will wanted to deny it, the Astral Gate would be responsible for investigating the mission's progress. Boom! Faced with Shadow Song's death, Purple Lightning's dream spirit, who was left with only her instincts, almost completely gave up on her swordsmanship. She used her sword like a knife, ruthlessly slashing at Purple Will. Every slash caused a terrifying shockwave, as if the entire dream world was shaking. Purple Will, who was already heavily injured, could only grit her teeth and endure. She was powerless to retaliate, but at least she could resist. As long as she could endure this round of attacks from Purple Lightning, boom, another slash fell. Purple Will's attention was only slightly distracted, and she was instantly struck by the sword. The purple smoke around her swayed uncontrollably. This kid, he's gotten stronger again. Purple Will did not know whether to laugh or cry. If she had come to the dream world to rescue her, only to die at her own son's hands, that would be a joke. The truly despicable one was that Gunan. Purple Will thought of this mercenary of hers. He had abandoned her and ran off alone, completely lacking the professionalism of someone who had been hired. Of course, she did not understand that players usually did not care about the life and death of NPCs without any additional rewards. They would only squeeze out every NPC's value. However, luck did not intend to let Gunan have it so easy. On the other side of the area, 3 figures suddenly barged in. It was Granny 2 and the Zhao brothers. That's the target's companion. Boss Zhao only needed to glance down to immediately determine Purple Lightning's identity. The person Zwazwo wanted to kill was Shadow Song, so naturally they were also looking for Shadow Song. However, Shadow Song had disappeared. Shadow Song existed as a dream spirit. When she died, her soul would naturally return to her body. There was no such thing as a corpse. Thus, Granny 2 and the other 2, who had arrived a step later, did not realize that their mission had failed. Instead, their eyes lit up. Finding the target's companions meant that they weren't far from the target. However, at this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared behind the 3 of them. The shadow sword suddenly slashed down, and it had a strange direction. 3 slashes with 1 sword. Gunan's sword was clearly going to kill all 3 of them at the same time. A Dream Master's body was not much stronger than an ordinary cultivator's. With Gunan's current strength, he could indeed do this. The Zhao brothers did not even manage to grunt before their heads fell to the ground. They were just 2 superhumans, and when they faced Gunan's sword, they could not even turn around. Granny 2 did not die under this sword. After all, she was a break world being, and she was in the dream world. The most important thing was that she was prepared. That's right. Even though there was no trace of Gunan at the scene, Granny 2 did not let her guard down at all. Therefore, the moment the shadow aura appeared, Granny 2's figure suddenly turned illusory. It was as if she had merged with the dreamy world and dodged the sword. Very quickly, she reappeared not far away. Her forehead was covered in a cold sweat, and she was very scared. But now was not the time to be scared. The sword did not hit, but Gunan's body was like a shadow. He floated in front of Granny 2 and stabbed again. This time, his target was her throat. In fact, no matter where he stabbed, as long as Granny 2 was hit by the sword, she would be torn to pieces by the shadow power. Granny 2 coldly smiled. It looked very normal, but it revealed a clear message. This was the dreamy world. If this was the outside world, someone like Gu Nan could kill her as easily as killing a chicken. In the dreamy world, it was possible for things to be reversed. With a wave of Granny 2's hand, she had already received the will of the dreamy world. A strange wave landed on Gu Nan's body, and at the same time, the nightmare beast began to fly towards them. A dream master could control a nightmare to kill his enemies. Now that Granny 2 was here, it was much easier for him to do so. When the weird wave landed on Gu Nan, the scene in front of him started to change. It was only a moment, but it felt like it was stretched infinitely. Granny 2's body started to distort. One moment, she turned into a beautiful lady. The next moment, she turned into someone that Gu Nan was familiar with. From a moment he arrived, Gu Nan, Lin Feng, Yang Lan, until the end, even red, purple in tint, and Shadow Song appeared in front of him. There were men and women, old and young. They were all people who had contact with Gu Nan. Not a single one was missed. Even Gu Nan himself could not remember how many people there were. Granny 2 stared at Gu Nan with a gloomy gaze. Of course, she knew what Gu Nan was going through. As long as one of these people could affect the other party's state of mind, this would be magnified many times until it filled up Gu Nan's mind. As long as one could affect the other party's state of mind for a moment, it would be enough for the nightmare beast to swallow him. So what if you have a strong will? Don't tell me that there is no one in your memories who can affect you. The sword flashed. Gu Nan's hand did not tremble at all. He had not stopped moving either. The shadow sword directly cut off Granny 2's head. The nightmare beast's movement also stopped. The answer was, of course, no. No. Ever since Gu Nan came to this world, there was no one who could affect him. He was like a traveler who always looked into the distance. Step by step, he walked through every land. The people he saw and the things he experienced were all left behind him. This was a person who would never look back. The moment before Granny 2's consciousness disappeared, she vaguely saw a trace of Gu Nan's heart. Therefore, this realization appeared in her heart. Everything was a waste of effort. After breaking the illusion with one slash, Gu Nan still had the time to look at her. He muttered, "This illusion is too weak. Does the body of the evil god have a built-in immunity to willpower checks?" There was no such thing as an illusion in the game. Even if there was, it depended on the player's willpower attribute. It was impossible for the player to overcome it on their own. Therefore, Gu Nan really did not understand this. In the blink of an eye, the 3 Dream Masters were killed by Gu Nan. Below, the mother and son pair, Purple Will and Purple Lightning, had finally come to an end. The winner was, of course, Purple Will. After all, she was the Star Master and had a deep understanding of Purple Lightning's methods. However, for the sake of victory, she had paid a hefty price. This could be seen from her incomparably pale face. After waiting for Purple Lightning to fall, Gu Nan strolled to Purple Will's side and said confidently, "The mission is completed. We can go back and settle the rewards." "You still dare to mention rewards?" Purple Will was shocked by Gu Nan's shamelessness. "Did you make a huge contribution in this battle?" Chapter 252. No matter who killed more people, it wouldn't affect Gu Nan's reward. According to the Astral Gate's logic, even if Gu Nan killed his employer, it wouldn't have anything to do with his quest, unless his quest was a protection quest. Of course, this behavior would be recorded. If someone wanted to hire Gu Nan again, this record would be sent to the next employer. But this wasn't important. With 100,000 spirit stones in hand, Gu Nan didn't need any more quests. When Gunan exchanged 100,000 units of spirit stones for active origin energy, even the star spirits in the hall of the astral realm gate paused for a while. Shadow Song's neighbor, Uncle Wong, please confirm your exchange request. In the many years of the astral gate's history, there had never been a strange exchanger like Gunan. He had exchanged 100,000 spirit stones for active sources at once. Whether it was a Star Lord or a World Breaker, it was difficult to use such a large number of sources. This exchange was even more incredible. Active sources weren't collectibles. If they weren't used quickly, they would lose their effectiveness. Who could use so much at once? If there was a chance, Gunan would tell them that the evil god temple could. Faced with 100,000 spirit stones for active sources, the evil god temple swallowed them without hesitation. Then it began to slowly digest them. So, Gunan looked at the evil god temple. From time to time, there would be a notification saying, God Fire Pollution. His sin value was slowly increasing. It will take about 2 or 3 days. Gunan looked at the growth rate and immediately made a judgment. The active origin was the divine fire, and by polluting the divine fire, the sin value gain would slow down or even decrease. This was within Gu Nan's expectations. In fact, even if he hunted gods in the later stages of the game, if he killed too many gods of the same level, his sin value would be limited. This setting was to encourage players to challenge new heights. It was also to prevent players from taking advantage of loopholes. If there wasn't such a setting, players would definitely be able to keep gods in captivity. Because of this, Gu Nan was temporarily idle. He stayed in his residence in purple Civ sky, quietly waiting for the day his sin value reached 2,500. However, in the process of waiting, he welcomed a guest. A rare guest. Gunan exclaimed in surprise as he looked at Purple Bolt. Gunan's residence in the Violet Civ Heaven was no secret. After all, he was searching right under Shadow Song's nose. Even Purple Wool could easily find him. However, Gunan was still rather surprised that Purple Bolt would come to visit him alone. Did something happen to that brat, Shadow Song? This was Gunan's first reaction. I'm not interested in accepting any more quests. She's fine, Purple Bolt said. I'm just here to act as bait to attract some people's attention. Gunan suddenly understood. You two are finally willing to part ways. Purple Bolt smiled calmly. Someone killed her right in front of her. She needs to learn her lesson. He was talking about the scene in the world of dreams. Even though it was a dream, it didn't mean that the two of them didn't understand what had happened afterward. They remembered the scene in the dream very clearly. It was the guy in front of them. He was like a natural-born assassin. Even with his protection, Shadow Song had died without being able to fight back. After that, Purple Bolt was scared. He was also glad that this person had not been hired by the enemy. You came all the way here just to tell me this. Gunan did not care about what Purple Bolt was saying. He just asked. With his current power, he was no longer afraid of world breakers. Plus, he had Sky God Descends to back him up. That shape-shifting god skill would help him a lot, even after he leveled up to level 5. After all, it was the third rule. Purple Bolt shook his head. He stood up and said, I just came to confirm your position. Now I'm sure. After that, Purple Bolt's body disappeared from Gunan's residence. Gunan looked at him strangely. Hansen didn't think he had a position. How could this person confirm it? After Purple Bolt left Gunan's place, he appeared next to Purple Will. How is it? Is it possible that he is on Zwazwa's side? Don't worry. Purple Bolt shook his head. He doesn't seem interested in our fight. He isn't even interested in the origin crystals. No matter what Purple Bolt confirmed, Gunan's leveling up was not going to be stopped by anyone. The active original source that Evil God Hall had eaten was still being digested, but his sin points had reached 2,500. He had enough points. Gunan's will sank into Evil God Hall. His heart was calm. Level up. When Gunan gave the command, Evil God Hall had a big change. On Gunan's personal interface, the laws of replacement, resurrection, and Heavenly God lit up one after another. In the end, they surrounded Shadow and connected to it. The process of leveling up to level 5 in this world was when world breakers perfected their own rules. They completed the process. For Gunan, it was a process of combining the 3 rules he had chosen with his core. Replace came from the shadow rule, so it was the easiest to connect. Rebirth was driven by the shadow power, so it was not difficult to combine. Only the sky god rule progressed very slowly. But the connection between the three rules and the core was getting weaker. That was what Gunan had created. No matter how slow the progress was, it would be completed one day. No matter how strong the rules were, they could not escape from Evil God Hall. The Sky God rule was completely taken over by the shadow. The golden body that represented Sky God on the icon had turned black. Gunan did not doubt that if he used Sky God Descends now, he would become a dark version of Sky God. The three rules and the shadow combined. Gunan's evil god body leveled up again. It was even stronger than before. An indescribable power came out of his body. Gunan felt his body swell up. It was like he was going to explode. If ordinary people were in this situation, they would have been worried sick. They would have been afraid. They would have exploded. But Gunan was calm. He had already experienced this kind of situation too many times. The evil god body was something that defied nature. It would have this effect in the later stages. Leveling up complete. 4 calm and emotionless words appeared on the notification panel of the evil god's palace. Gunan took a deep breath. He knew this was not the end. It was just the beginning. When his consciousness returned to reality, it was in the world of immortals and demons. Lan Si had painstakingly restored the original form of the world, which she called World Stone, and it was floating in front of Gunan. Even in Gunan's many years of gaming, he had never had such a good opportunity. Chapter 253. How strong was a rank 5? If Gunan was compared to himself when he was a rank 4, there was not much of a qualitative leap. The strengthening of his physical strength and the shading of the rules were all to pave the way for his future. The impact on his actual combat ability was not as great as he thought. An opponent that could be defeated at rank 5 could also be defeated at rank 4 with tactics. An opponent that could be defeated at rank 4 could also be defeated at rank 5. However, there was a fundamental difference between rank 5 and rank 5. This difference was not in strength but qualification. Rank 5 meant that Gunan was qualified to take over the God Nation. External fire seed detected. Ignite the divine fire? When this embryonic origin appeared in front of Gunan, the evil god's temple immediately sent a notification. The evil god's temple was like a loyal assistant, dutifully translating external information for Gunan and receiving external power without making any mistakes. Yes, Gunan didn't even think about it and directly gave an affirmative answer. You want to wait until the origin is stronger? No need. Gunan firmly believed that once the God Nation was established, the speed of this world's expansion would be far faster than before. Of course, Gunan did not hide his return from Lan Si and Yin Xiao. They were standing next to Gunan. At this moment, the world in their eyes suddenly changed. The sky seemed to darken all of a sudden. The sky that was originally damaged also stopped completely at this moment, and then began to repair itself. At the center of the continent, where Gunan and the other two were standing, an exquisite, majestic, and gloomy palace appeared out of thin air. This is... The two girls looked at this scene in astonishment. Lan Si was a little better. She had seen miracles in the god of flowers God Nation, but Yin Xiao could not understand it at all. It was not a camouflage, nor an illusion. It was a real palace. The two girls subconsciously took a few steps forward and finally saw the words on the plaque of the palace. They did not recognize them, but the meaning of these 3 words was directly reflected in their hearts. The evil god's temple, an inexplicable shadow, seemed to be slowly growing from the back of the palace, shrouding the hearts of the 2 women. Gunan didn't care about what they thought. He had finally gotten his god's kingdom, which meant that his game had entered a whole new stage. From this moment onwards, his path to leveling up was no longer to directly strengthen himself, but to indirectly achieve his goal of leveling up by building a powerful divine kingdom. Evil God's Temple, core building, foundation of God's kingdom, level 0. This was the notification that automatically popped up when Gunan's gaze landed on the evil God's temple. This evil God's temple was exactly the same as the one in Gunan's mind. Now, The one in his mind was only a shadow, and the real one had appeared in the divine kingdom. If Gu-Nen wanted to complete his first-class advancement, he only needed to upgrade the evil god's shrine to level 1. However, completing this upgrade was not easy at all. Gu-Nen needed at least 6 Tier 0 buildings. After officially possessing the divine kingdom, Gu-Nen's interface in the evil god's temple immediately changed. Some data that had never appeared before finally appeared. Wood, 0 ores, 0 sulfur, 0 crystals, 0 mercury, gemstones, gold. A series of resources appeared on the interface. Of course, the numbers behind them were all 0. However, Gu-Nen was not in a hurry. Such Tier 0 resources could be easily collected even in a mortal society. There was no pressure at all. The data behind it represented the power that the divine kingdom could provide for Gu-Nen. Divine power. Of course, this was not to say that the entire immortal demon world only had one divine power. Instead, the current Tier 0 evil god's shrine had an upper limit of 1 divine power. With Gu-Nen's current ability, he would need at least 1,000 divine power to be of any help to him in battle. Gu-Nen's first building target was the resource market. New players often built barracks and technology research centers as soon as they arrived. However, experts like Gu-Nen knew that the building that saved the most time was definitely the resource market. This was because the resources required for Tier 0 buildings were very common, but they were usually very complicated. They had to be transported to the evil god's shrine for them to take effect, which undoubtedly wasted a lot of time. The function of the resource market was to exchange resources of the same level. Of course, the price would not be 1. If it was wood for gemstones, the ratio could be as high as 5. 5 units of wood could be exchanged for 1 unit of gemstone. On the other hand, exchanging gemstones for wood was also 5. No matter how one looked at it, it was a black-hearted merchant. However, to save time in the early stages, it did not matter if he was black-hearted. 500 units of wood, 300 units of, or 50 units of gold. Gu-Nen made a long list and handed it to Yin Xiao. Yin Xiao looked at the list and was stunned for a long time. Teacher, how much is 1 unit? Well, what kind of wood is it? The amount doesn't matter, and neither does the type. Gu-Nen waved his hand and said, collect as many resources as you can from the list and transport them to the evil god's shrine. The resources that the evil god's shrine needed were not limited to the type. It had its own way of measuring them. Excessive resources could be converted through the market in the future. There was no need to worry about resources. Instead, the most important thing to build a building was points. Currently, Gu-Nen was still lacking a lot. To build a resource market, apart from a series of resources, he also needed a large number of points. How much? A total of 10,000. The 100,000 spirit stones that he had exchanged for sin points had long been used up when he was promoted to rank 5. Now, Gu-Nen was a pauper. However, adding up the points he had spent from rank 1 to rank 5, it was probably only 10,000. Now, building a building required 10,000. This was King inflation. As a veteran player, Gu-Nen had expected the price of goods that had been complained about by many new players, so he wasn't surprised. This was originally a deliberate design by the game designers to prevent players from saving money in advance and skipping the initial stage of the Kingdom of God. As for the method to earn points after reaching rank 5, Gu-Nen had actually mastered it a long time ago. That was the private instance dungeon. Private instance dungeons were used for interaction between players. In the game, it was a tool to make money. Lan Si, come with me. Gu-Nen's voice came from afar. His figure had already walked into the evil god's shrine. Lan Si did not understand. She looked back at Yin Xiao, who was also a loss. She could only follow Gu-Nen's footsteps. In the spacious evil god shrine, Gu-Nen stood quietly in the center. There was a red door beside him. You have successfully promoted to rank 4. Not bad. Gu-Nen looked at her with a smile. It's time to test your strength. Lan Si was stunned for a moment. Then, she suddenly became spirited. All these years, Gu-Nen had been providing her with cultivation resources. She had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. She needed a chance to prove that she was not a good-for-nothing who was waiting to die. Murder or arson? Lan Si asked subconsciously. Gunan glanced at her. Young man, don't be so impulsive. Behind this door is the splendid world. You will know what you need to do after you enter. Okay. Lan Si nodded her head and walked towards the door. You can resurrect if you die inside. I hope you can make good use of this ability. Also, Lan Si quickly walked forward. She only left behind a sentence. I will not die even once. 5 seconds later, Lan Si walked out of the door with a black face. Chapter 254. If it was 5 seconds ago, it would take Lan Si half a day to understand what starting point kill meant. However, after experiencing the terrifying meteorite at the beginning of this splendid world, Gunan didn't need to explain any further. She understood the name just by hearing it. What should I do? Lan Si didn't say what that meant, but her meaning was clear. Gunan naturally still remembered the strategy of the splendid world in his heart. After roughly explaining it to Lan Si, he sent her to continue throwing her life away. This instanced dungeon wasn't easy, and it was far more difficult to solo. When Gunan led the 3 Star Lords to explore it, they were wiped many times. Even if Lan Si had the guide, she still had to pay the tuition fee. Lan Si's figure disappeared from the evil god's temple, and Gunan looked at the other side of the temple. There was the instance dungeon interface. The first private instance dungeon lit up, and it was now red. Red meant that someone was in the middle of a private instance dungeon. This was the function of a private instance dungeon in a divine kingdom. Once it was set up, divine envoys would enter the private instance dungeon, and every time they cleared it, they would earn points for the divine kingdom. Splendid World was a 4-person instance dungeon, but Gunan only had one divine envoy, Lan Si, so he could only let her do alone. Under Yin, Xiao Xiao's leadership, a group of shadow servants began to collect and transport resources. In the following period of time, all kinds of resources would be continuously transported to the evil god's temple. There was no need to worry about resources for the time being, even if it took some time. The construction of a divine kingdom wasn't something that could be done overnight. The most important thing right now was for Gunan to recruit more divine envoys and unearth more private instance dungeons. There were no requirements for the recruitment of divine envoys. As long as Gunan was willing and the target agreed, they could become his divine envoy. This was much easier than being a god. When a god recruited divine envoys, the most important thing was faith. Evil gods and gods had many similarities, but they also had the most important difference. Evil gods didn't need faith. From god fire to divine kingdom, Gunan's path seemed to be no different from that of an ordinary god. However, when it came to things related to faith, it was far less complicated than that of a god. As for the source of the private instance dungeon, Gunan already knew about it. What he needed was the translation of the world will. In this regard, Gunan thought of a suitable candidate, and his figure instantly disappeared from the divine kingdom. The Star Realm. Red Tail stood on the land of Heavenly Kingdom Star and couldn't help but sigh. His mood was a little complicated. She had thought that she would never return to this place, and even if she did, she would never return with such an identity and attitude. A loser. To be precise, they were traitors. The secret translation method was a secret of the entire Green Hill tribe. It was not something that belonged to Red Tail alone. If she leaked the translation method to outsiders, she would be considered a traitor. This logic sounded right, but Red Tail knew better than anyone that it was just a joke. The translation method was very precious, but it was not so precious that he would have to die if he taught it to others. Even if it was within the star dimension, many great figures knew of this secret technique, and many of them had even been passed down by the Green Hill clansmen. Were they also treated as traitors? Of course not. On the contrary, these people held high positions in the tribe precisely because they used the resources of the tribe, and even their own bodies, to successfully contact the great figures. In the Green Hill clan, there were many resources like the translation method, which were used to be offered to some top powerhouses in exchange for their protection. And to be able to climb up to these powerhouses, it depended on the unremitting efforts of the clansmen. Today's Green Hill clan was such a strange group that constantly gambled. You will not die. You will be imprisoned in the underground water dungeon of the clan forever, despicable traitor. A woman who looked somewhat similar to Redtail, but younger, said calmly. Redtail glanced at her and then smiled silently. The truth of the tribe, of course, would not be told to every clansman. The girl in front of him, who could be regarded as his niece, was obviously still in the stage of being ignorant. Perhaps one day, when she was given as a gift to a great figure, she would understand all the secrets. Redtail wore a pair of shackles on his hands, and his power of principle was imprisoned. He silently followed the girl forward until they arrived at a quiet and secluded mountain. In ancient times, this Green Hill Mountain was once the holy land of the demons, and now it was just a high-class brothel. A hint of mockery flashed in Redtail's eyes, but he did not stop. A woman was slowly walking toward him. The woman was dressed in green, and her hair casually fell to her waist. There was a strange charm in her walk. "Mother!" The girl who led Redtail bowed slightly in front of the woman. "Leave this to me." "Yes." A moment later, the green-clothed woman walked beside Redtail and said with a smile, "Come to think of it, Sister Red hasn't been back for over 100 years, right?" Redtail looked at her coldly. "I just came back. Oh, I forgot about the incident at Shanghai Pavilion." The green-clothed woman continued to smile with her lips pursed. Previously, Shanghai Pavilion had mobilized all extraordinaires to come to the Central Galaxy to register, and Redtail had naturally returned. However, it was unknown if the green-clothed woman had really forgotten or mentioned it intentionally. The green-clothed woman and Redtail were of the same generation. Of course, her name was not as simple as Greentail. Her name was Su Yufei. In the Green Hill tribe, having an official name meant that one was already married, and that was the case with Su Yufei. In fact, in her generation, the only one who still used the clan name was Redtail. If you wanted to come back, just say it. You even have to use the excuse of rebellion? Redtail did not answer Su Yufei's question, but said with disdain, "Isn't it because we miss you, Sister Red?" Su Yufei pulled Redtail's sleeve and said gently. She did not look like a mother at all. Instead, she looked like an innocent little girl. However, what she said next was not the slightest bit naive. Calling Sister Red a rebel is the common intention of the 6 clan leaders. Su Yufei whispered into Redtail's ear, "This time, I'm afraid I'll have to let you enjoy your old age." Redtail, who had always been calm and steady, finally could not help but turn around this time. He looked at Su Yufei blankly, as if trying to find traces of lies on her face. But there was none. She did not need to lie because Green Hill was in front of her. The tribe's attitude toward her would soon be revealed. Redtail took a deep breath and looked at the quiet and secluded peak. He felt a little helpless in his heart. She could not resist the arrangements of the tribe. The freedom she had was all because of an elder, but now she did not forget who she had bet on. Although that person had disappeared a long time ago, he was still a break-world big shot. Chapter 255. At the peak of Green Hill, in a quiet and secluded house, 6 women with different appearances and extraordinary looks sat around it. It was rare for so many people to gather in the house, and it seemed a little crowded. More importantly, there were 2 people, one old and one young, sitting beside the 6. The old man was calm, but the young man looked a little impatient. As if seeing the young man's mood, one of the women said, "The person has been brought to Green Hill. Please be patient." Old Chien and Mr. Jean, the young man, who was called Mr. Jean, only grunted. The old man smiled and said, "Then I will have to trouble the 6 chiefs. No, it is the honor of the Green Hill tribe to work for Old Chien." The 6 women quickly spoke. In their eyes, Old Chien, who was accompanying them, seemed more frightening, even though he looked very approachable. For the Green Hill tribe, it was normal for people to fail in their bets. Whether the person who was chosen died or turned against them, the tribe would not punish the people because of that. If they had scruples even when betting, then how could they gamble with a small amount of money? Shanghai Pavilion was in chaos, and Yu Jiao's strange death was a mystery. No one in the outside world knew who killed him. The astral world impression of Gunan was that he had single-handedly killed his way into the central sector, but he was ambushed and disappeared. But he was a world breaker. As long as there was no proof that he was dead, who would risk capturing Redtail? This was also something that Redtail could not figure out. Let's go. Su Yufei seemed to become cold all of a sudden. She pushed Redtail, who was still in a daze. You will know when we reach the top. Hearing her words, Redtail nodded, and the two of them walked to the peak of Green Hill. Of course, there were already people waiting for them here, including the 6 chiefs of the Green Hill tribe, including the elder who admired Redtail, and 2 people, one old and one young. Pavilion Master Qian. Redtail bowed in fear. Even his hands were shaking, but there was not much panic in his eyes. There was only confusion. Redtail did not recognize the young man, but the old man was very familiar. This was an old man with white hair and a white beard. Many people had forgotten who he was, but Redtail, who had grown up listening to his stories, did not. This old man was called Qian Han. It was a very simple name, but his identity was definitely not simple. He was the previous owner of Shanghai Pavilion. Yes, before Yu Jio and the other 2, there was only one pavilion master in Shanghai Pavilion, and that was this old man called Qian Han. Back then, when his fame had reached its peak and he was about to rule over the entire Star Realm, he had handed over the Shanghai Pavilion to 3 juniors and left on his own. Some said that he had found a way to advance, while others said that he was too lonely after being invincible, so he abandoned the Shanghai Pavilion and went to the outside world. Very few people knew that he had actually gone deep into space. At the same time, in the depths of space. You're really wronging Qian Han by letting him do this kind of thing. There wasn't much mockery in Red's eyes, and even her tone was very calm, but made people feel that she was mocking him. Who was Qian Han? He was the person who had always stood behind Red, and he was also the person who had suddenly betrayed her at the most critical moment. Red was never a fool. Shanghai Pavilion was just a cover that she had placed outside. The real elite forces were all concentrated in her palace. It was just that even she did not expect that Zhuozhe, who had not set foot in the Star Realm for 10,000 years, would have a spy like Qian Han. Thus, overnight, she successfully became a loner and had no choice but to lead the power of an entire realm to fight against Zhuozhe. I didn't ask him to do this. Zhuozhe shook her head and said, I gave him a way to advance, and he trapped 9,000 of your elites. That's all. Zhuozhe was telling the truth. She and Qian Han were just trading, not subordinates. Otherwise, when they had surrounded and killed Gu Nan and snatched the origin, Qian Han would have been part of it. Then what does he want to do? Red did not ask this question. Her gaze fell on a young man beside Qian Han. The Golden Giant clan? Qian Han helped Red up unhurriedly and smiled. No need to be so courteous. I am here to ask you about the whereabouts of a person. Who is it? Redtail pretended to be curious, but in reality, she knew better than anyone else. Who else could she know that could make this person worry? Gu Nan. The familiar name entered her ears, but it was not Qian Han who spoke. Instead, it was the golden young master next to him who quickly walked up. He grabbed Redtail's hair, and his eyes were filled with violence. You are his most important subordinate in the 6-star region. Don't tell me you don't know. Redtail's eyes showed a hint of helplessness. She knew that the person in front of her dared to interrupt Qian Lao, so he was definitely not someone to be trifled with. But the problem was she really did not know. Redtail, you better think carefully before you speak. A gentle yet cold voice came from a front. Of course, Redtail recognized her. It was the one among the 6 clan leaders who did not think highly of her. However, in the current situation where the entire clan was in danger, she probably did not have the mood to gloat. She could only hope to push herself out to block the disaster, right? Redtail's eyes swept over the others, and there was only a similar indifference, including the elder who had always thought highly of her. Redtail understood this indifference very well. In the face of the entire clan's safety, personal feelings were nothing at all. I don't know. So, Redtail shook her head and said calmly, if she knew the whereabouts of Gu Nan, she might not hesitate to betray him. Unfortunately, she really did not know. Qian Han shook his head with some regret, and the golden young master showed a smirk. Very good. The golden young master kicked Redtail's neat joint and the latter suddenly knelt on the ground. The golden young master's palm was already raised high. Under the gaze of Redtail and the 6 clan leaders of Green Hill, the golden young master's body suddenly expanded and suddenly soared to the height of a few people. His body was even glowing with a strange golden color. The Golden Giant Clan, one of the 6 clan leaders said in shock. Su Yufei, who had been bowing and standing beside them, looked at the golden young master with a strange look in her eyes. The Golden Giant was one of the alien races. It was only a legend in the astral world, and no one had ever seen it before. Such an existence was the favorite big shot of the Green Hill clan. The aura around the golden young master's body became heavier and heavier, almost suffocating people. The first to bear the brunt was Redtail. Of course, Redtail understood that the other party was trying to force her to submit. But I really did not know. Redtail wanted to cry, but had no tears. She felt that she had completely suffered an undeserved disaster. Wait. At this moment, Qianhan's voice suddenly sounded. The golden young master looked at him doubtfully, and there was a hint of questioning in his eyes. With his background and violent personality, even Qianhan could not completely suppress him. Chapter 256. Gunan was here. There was no need to doubt that because he appeared out of thin air. He stepped into the little house on top of the green hill and stood in front of everyone. Qianhan saw Gunan appear and immediately greeted him. Are you Mr. Gunan? But Gunan did not even look at him. His eyes were on Redtail, who was behind him. Redtail was still kneeling on the ground. Her long black hair was being held by Mr. Jean. She looked very pitiful. However, Gunan didn't have the slightest intention to pity her. His gaze didn't even waver as he walked up to her. Are you willing to be my oracle? Gunan asked as if it was a routine job. I am willing. Redtail suddenly shouted. She did not know what a messenger was. She did not know what she needed to do, but she knew this was her only chance of survival. Mr. Jean maintained his golden giant form. He looked very powerful. He stared at Gunan and said, Gunan, you came at the right time. If you are a descendant of the Golden Clan, come back with me. A descendant of the Golden Clan? When those 6 words came out, not only were Su Yufei and the 6 leaders shocked, but even Redtail, who was on the ground, looked strange. No one knew Gunan's power better than she did. That extremely dark and mysterious rule power did not look like it had anything to do with the Golden Clan. Only Mr. Jean was very sure. It was because he saw the video Qianhan gave him. It was the scene of Gunan killing Yujio and activating Sky God descending. That was right. The scene of Gunan killing 3 top Breakworld people was not seen by others, but it could not be hidden from Qianhan's eyes. This old man, who stood at the top of the world many years ago, had even betrayed the master of Galaxy World. He had been watching this place. When the words Golden Clan fell into his ears, even Gunan could not help but look at Mr. Jean. He was too lazy to deal with the NPCs. It was not like he could not hear them. Looking at young Master Jin's expression, it was easy for him to understand what he had misunderstood. Speaking of which, the appearance of a descending god was indeed somewhat similar to the Golden Giant's true form, but there was still a fundamental difference between the two. The Golden Giants only had a golden color to their bodies. At the end of the day, they were still made of flesh and blood, while the bodies of Empyrean gods were completely formed by the laws. However, this was no longer important. After reaching Tier 5, his heavenly god Law was completely dominated by the power of shadows. He could no longer transform into a golden heavenly god. At most, he could transform into a black heavenly god. Therefore, Gunan still did not speak. He just took a step forward and casually punched young Master Jean. This punch looked ordinary, and it wasn't even that fast. The Golden Prince couldn't help but sneer. In his opinion, this Gunan didn't even reveal his true form and wanted to exchange blows with him. This was really, why did the punch already arrive? Before the Golden Prince could finish his thought, the seemingly unhurried punch landed on his face. A shocking pain came from his face. Young Master Jean felt as if his entire face had sunk in, and his body was involuntarily sent flying backward. In the eyes of the 6 clan leaders of Green Hill and Su Yufei, the body of the Golden Clansman who was arrogant just now, was rapidly shrinking as he flew backward. He was actually knocked out of his true form by Gunnan's punch. This also meant that this young Master Gene wasn't actually a pure-blooded golden giant. Otherwise, his true form would be a giant. Boom! Young Master Gene landed heavily on the ground. The house was directly smashed into a deep pit. His facial bones were completely broken, and his face was covered in blood. He hadn't completely lost consciousness, but he was close to it. After all, Gunnan had already advanced to Tier 5. Just like ordinary Star Lords, his law power didn't have any fundamental change, but the body of the evil god did. The Tier 5 body of the evil god became stronger, more extreme, and more mysterious. His strength was still not comparable to the Empyrean state at Tier 4, but his speed was even better. The Golden Prince's seemingly slow speed was actually the manifestation of extreme speed. Qian Han, who was originally planning to stop him, stopped his actions at this moment. He had already taken a step forward. At this time, he maintained the action of taking a step, as if he was frozen. It looked a little funny. However, he was Qian Han after all. After a moment, he retracted his leg as if nothing had happened and began to carefully size up Gunnan. Qian Han's vision was very high, and his vision was very accurate. Therefore, he was very sure that the punch just now did not carry any law power at all. It was just pure strength. However, his rationality was roaring. Could pure strength really reach that level? Gunnan still had the attitude of ignoring everyone. After confirming Redtail's wishes, he only did two things: sweep away the obstructors and take Redtail away. "Sir, please wait." A clear voice sounded, and Su Yufei's figure had already blocked in front of Gunnan. A clan leader behind her almost jumped up. "Yufei, are you crazy?" Su Yufei quickly said, "Sir, are you looking for Redtail for the translation method? My clan has a more complete version, as long as sir." Is what she said true? Gunnan did not wait for her to finish and directly turned to ask Redtail. At this moment, Redtail's gaze was almost about to swallow Su Yufei. This was completely a drastic measure. If Gunnan felt that the value of the Qing Qiu clan far exceeded his, then he could naturally abandon it at will. Yes, but Redtail did not have the courage to lie, and there was no need to lie because Su Yufei could take out the complete translation method with a flip of her hand. Gunnan nodded in satisfaction and said to Su Yufei, "Give it to me." Su Yufei's tense face finally relaxed a little. She felt that she had gambled correctly. This person was indeed here for the translation method. A charming smile appeared on her face, and she moved closer to Gunnan and said, "This translation method is a secret in the new family. However, if Sir wants it, as long as—" Bang! Before she finished her condition, Gunnan's fist had already landed on her face. Su Yufei's head was not as hard as young Master Jin's. Facing Gunnan's fist, her head directly burst open, and her body fell softly. Gunnan retracted his fist, and there was not even a trace of blood left on his white, jade-like skin. At his level, his body would no longer be stained with dust, and the filth of the secular world could not leave a trace on his body at all. Su Yufei's death made the hut fall into dead silence again, and Gunnan shifted his gaze to the 6 clan leaders. "Take out the complete translation method." Gunnan's calm and indifferent voice sounded, "Don't talk about conditions, you know the consequences." So the 6 clan leaders fell into silence. Chapter 257. Gunnan understood the principle of equivalent exchange, but he only agreed with it. For the players, if everything was equivalent exchange, then what was the point of playing the game? The players were more than happy to be a group of locusts, stealing everything they could see and strengthening themselves with the highest efficiency. They never cared about what the victims thought. If I can't beat the monster, I need to buy scrolls, equipment, and potions. If I can beat it, of course, I'll just kill it and get the equipment. The 6 leaders looked at each other. They realized Su Yufei's suicidal behavior had triggered something, but the most important thing now was to get through this. "Yes, please wait. We will give you the translation method immediately," one of them finally said. Gunnan nodded and didn't say anything. He had always been patient when it came to things that he needed. In the Qingqiu clan, he needed a complete translation method, and so did Redtail. He didn't just want the translation method, but he also wanted Redtail's talent. After running the White Mist for 100 years, Redtail had a lot of experience in running a reincarnation organization. If she rebuilt the White Mist, the efficiency would be higher than if Gu Nin did it himself. That was his ultimate goal. Gu Nin needed enough fog mirrors to open up more private dungeons for him. It was a shame there wouldn't be another talent like Redtail and Greenhill. The reason was simple. Aside from her, the translation method was just a tool in Greenhill. No one had ever used it themselves. Deep in space. I didn't expect this. Red's calm voice had a rare hint of surprise. That surprise was directed at Gu Nan. After Gu Nan made his move, with Red and Zhua's level, it wasn't hard to see his true level. He is probably the youngest Star Master in history. Zhuo found it funny. It's a shame. Red knew what he was regretting. Such a talent had come into contact with both of them, but they didn't grasp the opportunity. The opportunity to recruit him and the opportunity to kill him. Now, whether it was recruiting or killing, it was impossible. The Star Masters were all the same level. Very few Star Masters were affiliated with other Star Masters. To kill a Star Master was much harder than killing a World Breaker. Red fell silent, but Zhuo continued. He just came back to take his things. You have at most 1 month. If she doesn't make a move now, there won't be a chance. The two of them had been in a stalemate for several years. Of course, they weren't just standing there foolishly. Zhuo's oppression of the astral realm was constantly ongoing. Therefore, Zhuo knew very well that Red was already an arrow at the end of its flight and wouldn't be able to last much longer. If Shadow Song wanted to act, this was his last chance. Red looked at him silently, and there seemed to be a smile in her eyes. You're scared. The complete translation method was soon presented to Gu Nan. Redtail once again became an appraisal master. The person who gave the translation method to Gu Nan was Bai Qing, the senior who had always admired Redtail. My apologies, sir. Apart from Redtail, no one else in the clan has established a reincarnation organization. Bai Qing said pitifully, but she regretted it in her heart. After learning about Gu Nan's specific request, she understood how lucky Redtail was. It turned out that being the leader of a reincarnation organization was her true value. Gu Nan couldn't help but feel a little regretful that he only got Redtail, but he still nodded and took the translation method. He turned around and was about to leave with Redtail. Qian Han's voice sounded at the right time. Your Excellency Gu Nan, I have something to tell you. Please wait. At this time, Qian Han was bowing slightly, standing next to young Master Jin. To be precise, he was standing next to young Master Jin's corpse. Even if it was the Golden Giant, it would only be able to bounce a few more times before the Grim Reaper descended upon it. Qian Han saw that young Master Jin couldn't be saved and felt helpless. After all, he was the one who took Gu Nan's image to find the Golden Clan. Now that something like this had happened, if he didn't give an explanation, how could the Golden Giant let him go? He had already calculated that no matter how Gu Nan answered, he would have a way to provoke the follow-up topic. However, he maintained his posture, but Gu Nan's voice didn't come for a long time. Qian Han raised his head in confusion. Where was Gu Nan's figure in front of him? Elder Qian. Bai Qing was standing next to him and said awkwardly, that person has left. Gu Nan didn't care about what Qian Han said at all. He went to the astral realm and left with what he wanted. That was all. Your Excellency, you killed a Golden Giant just like that. Redtail stood next to Gu Nan and said uneasily, that's an alien race. What is that? Gu Nan asked. All he knew about the Golden Giant clan was probably the appearance of young Master Jin's original body. Redtail looked at him as if he had seen a ghost. This person didn't know anything at all. Beyond the heavens, there are many strange races and living beings. They're called alien races. Redtail had never left the heavens in her life, and even her original body had never left the astral realm. However, this didn't affect her understanding of the outside world. And Gu Nan knew a lot about this. Living beings beyond the heavens? Perhaps it has something to do with the world of gods. Once I've settled down here, I could go investigate. Gu Nan pondered while stroking his chin. His thoughts didn't affect Gu Nan's movements. He had already brought Redtail to the evil god's temple in the god kingdom. A faint purple light began to shine down. The purple light fell on Redtail, but she didn't resist. She just calmly accepted the baptism of the eerie aura. After a moment, she opened her eyes again. Her originally dark pupils had a hint of purple. Gunan nodded in satisfaction. Redtail had successfully become his second god's messenger. There was no limit to the recruitment of oracles, as long as the target submitted. However, this submission was not just for show. Otherwise, the evil god's temple wouldn't recognize them. Even if they hid it for a while, they would be immediately removed from the ranks of oracles if they had other thoughts in the future. My lord, Redtail, who had regained consciousness, bowed to Gunan to show her absolute obedience. Gunan only nodded calmly. Your mission is to rebuild White Mist. Get the complete translation method and choose a suitable target plane as soon as possible. White Mist wants to establish branches everywhere. Redtail already knew what Gunan needed her to do. She nodded in agreement. Then, she heard Gunan speak again. Do you know any of the more famous agents? Gunan wanted to recruit oracles to help him clear dungeons. The most suitable targets were, of course, the agents in the reincarnation organization. Redtail was stunned for a moment, then quickly said, Yes, I know someone who is very suitable. But what? Gunan raised an eyebrow. She has already retired for many years. Now that she has children and grandchildren, I'm afraid she's unwilling to come out. Chapter 258. Zhang Dongsheng was very excited. Unlike Gunan, Tang Xian, and the others who had left the Ming Lu, he had remained inside the Ming Lu. He had come from the asteroid belt to the Red Car branch, and then moved up step by step. Now, he had arrived at the central starfield. He could be considered to have reached the pinnacle of his life. The team of 7 he was in now was made up of extraordinaires above the nuance realm, and each of them had special abilities. They were truly an elite team. Such an elite team had suffered repeated setbacks in the current mission. In the end, under the leadership of their captain, they had come to seek help from a senior. It was said that it was this senior Guan who had led their captain into the sect. It was still unknown whether Senior Guan would be willing to help with this mess. He hadn't expected to meet Gunan here. What a pleasant surprise. Zhang Dongsheng hadn't forgotten that when Gunan was still in the innate realm, he had already cleared the Ming Lu's missions like it was a game. Until he left, Gunan's mission completion rate had been 100%. The longer he stayed in the Ming Lu, the more Zhang Dongsheng realized how terrifying Gunan had been. It wasn't that he was strong, but that he was too well-rounded. So many types of missions hadn't been a problem for him. But now, in this situation, Gunan had taken the initiative to come to him. It couldn't be any better. Gunan, do you have time to chat with me? Zhang Dongsheng walked over to Gunan's side once more, and he revealed a smile of an old friend as he spoke calmly. No. Haha, you're still as cold and humorous as ever. Zhang Dongsheng tried his best to smooth things over. It's our captain who wants to meet you, Eternal Domain Expert, and Windy, nicknamed Ghost Sword. As if he had heard his name, the bearded man, and Windy, turned his head and looked in the direction of Zhang Dongsheng and Gunan. He was waiting for Gunan to turn his head and look in his direction so that he could nod at the right time. This way, not only could he show his respect for the talent, but he could also show his status. And when he had been a captain for so many years, he was already familiar with this routine. However, what puzzled him was that Gunan acted as if he didn't hear anything. Not to mention turning his head, he didn't even bat an eyelid. Gunan! Zhang Dongsheng saw that he wasn't moving and shouted again. You're such a busy man. Can't you find some time to meet our captain? Gunan finally turned around unhurriedly. It's not that I don't have time, it's that you don't have time. In the next moment, before Zhang Dongsheng could understand what he meant, a loud noise came from outside. The glass at the entrance of the hall shattered, and the doors and windows were broken at the same time. The flying glass fragments caused the people in the hall to scream and curse angrily, but the scariest thing was yet to come. One by one, black-clothed figures rushed in, holding standard long sabers in their hands, crazily slashing at the guests present. This Zhang Dongxing stared at this scene, dumbfounded. He couldn't say anything for a while. Red Tail looked at Gunan strangely, because this was what Gunan had specifically instructed him to do. Only cold weapons could be used to kill an entire family. It had to be bloody and cruel enough to give Guan Hongshun the greatest amount of pressure. There were many people who had the same reaction as Zhang Dongsheng. This kind of vendetta was too rare on Planet Peach Blossom. This was Planet Peach Blossom. These people were so unscrupulous. Were they not afraid of the anger of the three elders? The three elders of Planet Peach Blossom were very powerful and experienced world breakers. Even the Shanghai Pavilion had to take care of their connections and power. They were the foundation of Planet Peach Blossom's extraordinary status. The crazy slaughter continued. The guests had already fled in all directions. Captain and Wendy was shocked at first, but then he was wild with joy. He and the others had just arrived and encountered this kind of thing. This was an opportunity, and Wendy knew very well that the overall strength of these black-clothed people was not very strong. The leader of the team was not even in the Eternal Domain realm. Many of them were only innate stage warriors. Wasn't this a favor that had been delivered to their doorstep? Attack! And Wendy shouted. He was the first to rush out. With a wave of his hand, he killed a black-clothed assassin. The other members of the elite team followed closely behind their captain. They joined in the fight against the assassins. There was only one exception. It was Zhang Dongsheng. He was still standing next to Gunan, not daring to move. Judging from Gunan's words just now, these assassins were obviously his doing. Zhang Dongxing did not know what level Gunan was at, but he had become a transcendent many years ago. Now, he could not be much weaker than Zhang Dongsheng. Zhang Dongsheng had to keep an eye on him. What confused him was that Gunan did not seem to be doing anything. He just watched everything calmly. "Mister, do you want me to?" Red Tail asked softly. She saw that more than half of the black-clothed people had been killed in the blink of an eye. She could not help but feel anxious. If she attacked, the situation could be turned around in an instant. "It's fine." Gunan waved his hand. He did not expect much from Red Tail. His only goal was to lure Guan Hongchen out. His shadow body could also wipe out the entire family. However, it would cause too much of a commotion. He was afraid that the target would be scared away. Guan Hongchen had not appeared yet. It seemed like he was right. She was a calm woman. The black-clothed assassins were killed very quickly. Not only didn't Wendy and the others help, but the guests also came back to their senses and helped kill the black-clothed people. Moreover, Guan Hongchen's family had powerful cultivators in reserve. These assassins could not cause too much of a commotion. After a short while, the situation was completely under control. The main family finally appeared. The leader was a beautiful and mature woman. "That's Guan Hongchen," Red Tail said to Gunan. She did not care about Zhang Dongsheng at all. Her husband's surname is Zhu. He died a long time ago. Now, she's the head of the Zhu family. As Red Tail spoke, and Wendy had already walked to Guan Hongchen's side and greeted her. "Senior Guan." It's Xiao, and Guan Hongchen quickly recognized in Wendy. Before he could speak, she said, "I'll catch up with you later." And Wendy hurriedly nodded. Guan Hongchen had no time to talk to him now that something like this had happened to the Zhu family. Guan Hongchen's methods were indeed powerful. She quickly calmed the situation down. Then, she slowly walked to Gunan and looked straight at Red Tail. "Lady Red Tail, it's been so many years. Are you still not willing to let me go?" Her tone was polite but distant. It was obvious that her relationship with Red Tail was not as simple as a comrade in arms. Red Tail laughed softly. "No matter what you think about what happened back then, I'm afraid you have no choice but to come out now." Before Guan Hongchen could speak, and when he saw that this woman was actually his competitor, he immediately shouted, "Senior, if someone uses their family to threaten you, you can come back to Ming Lu. Let's see who dares to openly oppose Ming Lu." In the astral realm, Ming Lu's reputation was still very useful. Thus, and when he felt much more at ease when he mentioned the organization's name. He also kept giving Zhang Dongsheng looks. Who knew what this bastard was doing? He actually ran over to the other side. If Senior Guan misunderstood, wouldn't it be an undeserved disaster? When Guan Hongchen heard and Wendy's words, he gave him a look to calm down. Then he said, "You've been away from the central starfield for so long. Have you forgotten where you are?" Huh? Red Tail raised her eyebrows. She was about to speak when she heard Gunan speak calmly. "Someone's here." As soon as Gunan finished speaking, a figure instantly appeared out of thin air in midair. It was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. His face was filled with a frivolous smile. It was obvious that he was also an old playboy. When Guan Hongchun saw this old man, his expression instantly relaxed. "Ha ha!" The old man stood in midair and glanced at Red Tail. He laughed heartily and said, "The Peach Blossom Planet has only been peaceful for a few decades. I didn't expect that someone would come and cause trouble again." Huh? Before the old man could finish speaking, his expression suddenly changed. He saw the young man waving his hand lightly below him. Then his hair stood on end, and he felt a great sense of danger in his heart. In the next moment, a giant shadow hand suddenly appeared in the air. It slapped down without any warning, and the old man was directly swatted to the ground like a fly. Guan Hongchun looked at this scene as if she had seen a ghost. Then she saw the young man slowly stand up and step in front of her. Chapter 259. Gunan's goal was always clear. He needed Guan Hongchun to be his god messenger, so everything he did was to serve that purpose. If it was necessary, he didn't mind killing all of Guan Hongchun's family and leaving her only one grandson. That way, he could force her to work for him. But now, he found a more efficient way. The old man, one of the 3 elders of the Peach Garden, was still lying in the ruins. The entire place was silent. Only Gunan's footsteps could be heard. Even the sound of his footsteps was no different from a normal person's. That meant that after Gunan reached level 5, he had put away all of his miraculous powers. If he didn't attack first, no one would be able to tell that he was a planet master. But he attacked, and he knocked out one of the 3 elders of the Peach Garden. This made Guan Hongchun's scalp go numb. She knew that this was not going to end well. And Wendy and the others were speechless. They didn't know who Gunan was, but they at least knew one thing. The old man who had just appeared was a world breaker. To the Transcendent team, a world breaker was a very important person. But now this important person had been slapped to the ground like a fly. Zhang Dongsheng was also shocked, but he always had this expression. It wasn't obvious now. Guan Hongchun took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. "What orders do you have, mister? Do something for me, or I will kill your entire family." Gunan's orders were simple and to the point. Guan Hongchun didn't know what to say. She had never seen such an unreasonable person before. She never thought something like this would happen to her. She looked at Red Tail, and she finally understood why she had said that. "Wait a moment." A voice interrupted Guan Hongchun's reply. It wasn't in Wendy, who was scared out of his wits. It was the old man, who was struggling to get out of the ruins. There was still blood at the corner of his mouth. After all, he used to be a top world breaker. Gunan had reached level 5, but his rule powers hadn't improved much. He wouldn't be able to kill the old man with one hit. The old man glared at Gunan. "Young man, I bang." Another palm fell. This time, it was Gunan who personally attacked. His speed was so fast that his palm seemed to have crossed space and landed directly on the old man's head. The old man's head burst open in an instant, bursting into a bloody mist in midair and falling to the ground dejectedly. Thus, a deathly stillness that was far more terrifying than before enveloped everyone. When Guan Hongchun saw this, she didn't think for too long. She sighed softly and said, "I'm willing to follow you, my lord." After personally witnessing one of the Peach Blossom's 3 elders being killed by Gunan, Guan Hongchun no longer had any thoughts of resisting. He only followed behind Gunan silently. She was not worried that the other party had other intentions. With this person's level of power, the only thing that could catch his eye was his mission level. Just as Guan Hongchun had expected, the other party took her to an unknown little world and told her what he wanted. "I need you to help me clear an instance dungeon. I already have the strategy, and I will give you an assistant." Gunan led Guan Hongchun, who was now a god messenger, to the Beautiful World instance. Lan Xizheng had been tortured by Beautiful World. He had not even cleared the first stage. He stood next to Gunan with a dark face. Guan Hongshun could feel Lan Xijing's body. It was like a deep sea. It was like a tide, and it was scary. She carefully said, "I understand. I will help you, my lord." Gunan didn't care who was the leader. He just wanted to clear the instance dungeon. When you clear the instance dungeon, you can pick some resources here and send them to the galaxy world. Gunan understood the principle of using benefits to drive people. But he wouldn't let Guan Hongshun leave the God Kingdom just yet. The God Messenger wasn't completely safe. Even the gods who had faith in them had betrayed them before, let alone the players. Yes, Guan Hongshun was obedient. She happily accepted all of Gunan's orders. Even though she didn't really understand the meaning of an instance dungeon, she could understand Gunan's intentions. If she wanted to see her family again, she had to do her best to complete the mission. "Oh, right." Gunan suddenly spoke. If Redtail was here, he would definitely be fearful of this word. "Do you have any other friends who are good at this?" This. Guan Hongshun was stunned. She seemed hesitant about betraying others. This instance dungeon can only allow 4 people at most. Yes, Redtail was already looking for a suitable plane to rebuild the White Fog. After making arrangements for Guan Hongshun, Gunan could take a break. The construction of a god kingdom wasn't something that could be done in a day or two. Gunan had already experienced this in the game. The Evil God game focused on a fast pace in the early stages to capture the players. But after level 5, the pace slowed down. The main goal was to kill time. This was also in line with the style of the game company. They would always try their best to keep the players who were already addicted. Gunan's current goal was to upgrade the Evil God's Temple from level 0 to level 1. That way, he would have a level 1 God Kingdom and officially complete his first job transition. If he wanted the God Kingdom to provide him with combat power, he would have to wait until his God Kingdom was at least level 3 or 4. Level 1 Evil God's Temple required 6 level 0 basic buildings. All kinds of basic resources were being transported into the Evil God's Temple. He had already met half of the building requirements for the resource market. Because the God Kingdom wasn't technologically advanced, there was a huge surplus of wood and/or resources. Fortunately, the Evil God's Temple could collect resources and convert them into data. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be able to store them. Guan Hongshun, on the other hand, recommended many candidates to Gunan under the stimulation of clearing the game. Guan Hongshun was different from an organizer like Redtail. As a pure agent, her circle was naturally mainly made up of agents. She had many more people in her pocket than Redtail. Gunan took action personally. After a few rounds of trouble, he slaughtered 2 families and eliminated a few weaker ones. In the end, he chose a father and son pair to add to his list of God messengers. After gathering the 4 people to farm Splendid World, Redtail also decided to build the White Fog. They needed Gunan's help to deal with the small plane with a different time flow. Just as the God Kingdom construction was progressing and everything was on the right track, a figure arrived at the edge of the heavenly world. Chapter 260. The so-called outer space aliens did not really live in an alternate dimension. Outside the sky, there were many planes, but they belonged to another plane cluster. For Break World people, traveling between planes was an easy task. There were many people who wanted to explore the outer worlds. They went to the outer worlds themselves. Qin Han was one of those people. Although he was the manager of Red Palace, Red was not in Star for half a year. He had a lot of time to travel. It was under such circumstances that he discovered the Golden Giant tribe's territory. Mr. Jean Wuyin, this is the video of Gunan's transformation. Qin Han stood in front of a tall, gold man and spoke with respect. He had to be respectful because he knew the man in front of him was not just the leader of the Gold Giant. He was the real planet leader. The Gold Giants had been in outer space for tens of thousands of years. If it were not for the planet leader, they would have been conquered by other powerful factions. The Gold Giants were born with God power, and their bodies were indestructible. They had strong rule resistance. It was not an exaggeration to say they were a race that heaven and earth loved. But the more talented a race was, the harder it was for them to maintain their independence. Their very existence was enough to attract many greedy eyes. Qian Han carefully looked at the man. With his identity, he did not expect to see this man. But now, because of Mr. Jean, he was stopped by this man. If he could, Qian Han did not want to meet this leader like this. From the video, it does look like him. Even the leader of the Gold Giant said the same thing. But the video does not have his presence. That is the most telling. When Gunan became Sky God, everything around him that was related to rules was suppressed. The video Qian Han was holding was made with technology, so it did not have a presence. Qian Han had a wry smile as he explained. He tried to describe how strong Gunan was, but he did not know where to start. Every time he thought of that scene, he could only think of one word to describe it: Sky God. Jean Wuyin slowly stood up and quietly said, "No matter who it is, if he kills my people, he must pay the price." "Where is this person?" "Air. I do not know," Qian Han said honestly. Who knew which plane the World Breaker would be in? However, clan leader Jean Wuyin was obviously not a reasonable person. He picked up Qian Han, stared at him coldly, and said, "If you can't find any trace of him in 3 months, I will kill you." Of course, Gunan didn't know that someone was going to pay for his life. He was bringing Redtail to a small plane called Crescent World. The Crescent World was a small plane that had only been discovered in recent years. Due to the lack of resources, not many people were interested in this place. However, it was located in a relatively remote location within the heavens, and the time flow was very slow. Compared to the heaven and world realms, it was a plane that was extremely suitable for training talents and harvesting at fixed points. The human civilization in the moon world is still in the feudal era, but the level of power is not low. It is the most suitable place to cultivate the children of Providence. Redtail explained the benefits of the moon world. The Crescent World rarely communicated with the outside world. It was basically a small, closed world. The power system was quite good. There were almost break-world beings. It was a sealed small world, but the martial system was not bad. There were almost break-world beings. At first, prenatal and innate were the same. After innate, it was Sky Chi and Sky Spirit. Sky Chi warriors can fly, so they're the same as super beings. When Sky Spirit reaches the peak, they can break through space. That should be the description of World Breaker. Redtail had done her homework. She had a deep understanding of Crescent World. If she was given a bit more space, she might even have an organization. Let's find a Sky Spirit warrior first and see how much power they have, Gunan said with interest. He was not as busy as a normal planet master. Rebuilding the White Mist was one of the most important steps of building a god kingdom. Everything was difficult at the beginning, so Gunan did not mind doing the first step himself. If he could successfully take down Crescent World and use the power here to conquer other planes, it would be much easier. Crescent World only had one land shaped like a crescent moon. Now, the royal family was weak and many people were rising. The students of all the big sects came out to build a foundation. Gunan and Redtail's first stop was the Xing Mountain. There were 2 of the 8 big sects there. It was a holy land of martial arts. Mingchan Temple and Zhongli Sword Party. Gunan walked in the mountains and read the names of the 2 sections. One was a sword sect, and the other was a Buddhist sect. They were the top sects in Crescent World, and they had Sky Spirit warriors. Let's go to Zhongli Sword Party first. The mountain wind blew on his face. Gunan did not hesitate. He quickly made a decision. Most of the Buddhist skills had their own magic, so it was not good to observe them. In comparison, swordsmen were a bit better. The Xing Mountain was not big, but Zhongli Sword Party took up a lot of space. Even the villages at the foot of the mountain belonged to them. If a normal visitor wanted to visit, they would have to start from the guest pavilion at the foot of the mountain. They would have to visit step by step. That was the only way to show off the status of the 8 big sections. Gunan was there to cause trouble, so he did not care that much. He brought Redtail with him and descended from the sky. He stopped and looked at the sky in front of him. That was the most iconic building of the Zhongli Sword Party. It was the Sky Sword Tower. Redtail noticed what Gunan was doing and said, "The Sky Spirit people here do not have the power to break the world. The chances of them staying in the sect are high." "True," Gunan laughed. "Their bodies are not here, but they can come back at any time." Redtail was shocked. He looked at the giant sword-shaped sky, sword tower, and seemed to understand something. In the next moment, the two of them disappeared. They reappeared in the main hall. There was a group of people standing there. They were holding a fight. When Gu Nan and Redtail appeared, a young man was using his sword to knock away his opponent's longsword. He smiled as if he had won. Brother Yin, you still need to practice your piercing cloud sword skill. The young man swung his sword and looked at his opponent. He was going to enjoy Brother Yan's defeat. He was going to look sad and unwilling. But he noticed Brother Yin was looking at him with fear. The young man seemed to have understood something. He suddenly turned his head to look behind him, only to see a man and a woman standing there quietly. Who are you? The young man blurted out. Before he could finish speaking, he felt his vision start to float up. His face was in pain. His whole body was sent flying. In the eyes of others, it was clear that his opponent had coldly looked at him, but the young man had been sent flying. Who is the leader? Came the calm voice from the man's mouth. An old man with an old face, but shrewdness in his eyes, slowly stood up and looked at the other party solemnly. The Zhongli Sword Party is now one of the 8 big sects in the world. We have the protection of the God-connecting elder. The old man immediately brought up his background. You have come to bully my student. Are you going to make an enemy out of our leader? The old man's voice echoed through the hall. He could tell the man's power was unpredictable, so he did not say anything. He knew only the leader could suppress him. Surprisingly, the man's face was still emotionless. He only said one word.